now that they have done that, they've done their job, and that they found the killer. But there's still a long way to go. I also asked him, I said, I've been hearing this might take several weeks, if not longer. He said he's hearing the end of January. Plus, we have all the holidays to deal with as the calendar flips from November to December. So this could be a long while. And as we heard yesterday, the defense, they're not given an inch. Even if maybe it looks like the odds are stacked against them, they are lining up a defense. Looks like they're going to try to go after this pharmacist. They're going to go after some of the evidence that was collected. They already tried to take down some of the evidence that was brought up, like Ian Mitcham's car being spotted in the area a couple of times on the night of the murder. He apparently made a deposit or two at a local ATM bank. And they already came up with reasons why that doesn't necessarily make him any more connected than anybody else to Allison Feldman. Other than that, the prosecution did admit they cannot find a direct link between these two prior to the crime scene, and they really don't have a motive.
Yeah, and that was what I thought was interesting, because there's a mountain of evidence, but very, very slim on motive that was coming out.
Jurors want motives, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. They want a story of why did this happen, and why was this poor woman brutalized in the way that, that happened. But I thought what was most just absolutely heartbreaking was hearing that 911 call that was played out in court. Allison's boyfriend, Alex, took to the witness stand, and right before all that played out, I mean, he talked a little bit about, even 10 years later, just the pain and the suffering that he's had to go through in his life, having his girlfriend ripped away from him, and how his life's been forever changed. But hearing him make that initial call, wow, it's not only heartbreaking, but just shocking as a human being. And I think we have a little bit of that if we can play that clip.
No, listen to me. We have help coming out there. When was the last time you spoke to her?
I spoke to her. We exchanged text messages yesterday in the evening. I was studying for my real estate.
Okay, all right.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Any medical problems?
No, she's just none of it. The medical problems. There's blood everywhere.
I understand. Okay, listen. Is there any?
It looks like somebody's trying to clean up. It smells like chlorine, bleach.
Okay, you know what? You need to step outside. Petey, are you there?
I am staying outside.
Yes, okay. We're here. We're on our way.
Sir, is there any sign of a weapon or anything?
No, there's nothing around. She's in the hallway.
Okay, take a deep breath.
Fire, did you hear that we're going?
Yeah, I did. Okay, sorry. It's okay.
Oh, my God.
Did you hear what he said about cleaning it up?
What is it?
Sir, when you said you smelled bleach, okay, and you said there's blood everywhere, where do you mean everywhere? Where
it's on the floor. It's dragged around. It looks like someone might have tried to clean something up, or she might have tried to clean it up. I have no idea.
Okay. All right.
Oh, my God, she's blue. She's blue and white.
What is your...
It's hard to hear. And leading up to that, they had taken him back a couple of days, where that was on the 15th, I believe, or
February, right?
February, the murder was.
Yep.
He found her a day or two later.
Right.
They even took him back to Valentine's Day just to show what, like everybody, trying to live a normal life.
Yeah.
Took her out to a movie, I believe.
Sounds like a perfectly
Valentine's
normal,
Day.
loving relationship.
Loving couple.
Yeah.
He was studying for a real estate exam, I believe, so he didn't necessarily keep in touch with her as much as maybe he would have, because he was busy. But then it got a little weird when she wasn't, after all that time, getting back to him. I hesitate saying this. I know being a 911 operator is a very tough job, but I do wonder sometimes about what they're saying, and there's got to be a goal for them. Help the person who's calling and the victim who's there. But as you saw right there, two people were talking to him, and it got a little confusing to him right at a point about cleaning. Who's cleaning this? And he got a little tripped up, didn't he, at one point, saying, I'm not the one cleaning.
Right.
I just smell Clorox. So it just seemed a little like, why are there two conversations? Maybe there needed to be. I'm not an expert,
Right.
but I've heard other 911 calls where I'm like, there's too much going on here. We need to laser focus on this person on the other end of the phone.
I believe the 911 operator at the time, because again, too, I mean, it just shows you how chaotic these moments can be, where it's the initial call and then the dispatcher's trying to get resources out there. But that was actually, I believe, like the fourth or the fifth person he was transferred to. And you can imagine having to tell the same story when, gosh, your loved one's right there, brutalized in front of you, and your dead, lifeless bodies happening. And you're hearing this person repeatedly ask, like, okay, what was that street where this happened? Or, are you inside, outside? Right. And then hold on for a second, we got to transfer you. And he's getting frustrated. And then the soundbite we just played out, again, that's the fourth or the fifth person this guy's at. And then they're bringing in the police sergeant who's responding, and they're trying to relay some information. So he's hearing that it wasn't muted. And, there might have been he may be trying to clean it up. And, poor guy in the moment thinking like, whoa, like, what's going on? You're accusing me of this? Maybe?
The worst moment of his life. And again, I know being a 911 operator is probably among the most difficult jobs out there. But and even to me a little bit, asking the address right off the bat, I know that makes sense to them to get someone there. But human nature is, I want to tell you what is happening, not where I am. So it's a messy situation all the way around. I do not want to blame anybody. I know it is on all counts.
No, but it shows you.
Worst moment of his life, and he had to talk to four people to get. It's just, it just must be frustrating to be on his end of the line.
Yeah, and you've got all your senses going. Like you said, the first thing that he immediately realized was when he walked in was the strong smell of bleach. Clorox bleach just hitting him in the face. And so you've got that going on, and then you're seeing this horrible sight. I mean, who knows what your brain's like trying to process all of those things at one time. It's just extraordinary. And man, the other thing I thought about too was hearing that in court 10 years later, this guy's having to re-witness that. And you've got to think that in that 10 years that's gone by, your mind and just how it remembers all those things, and then just to hit you again. But for the family, for the father, right, Harley Feldman, to be in court and to hear how his daughter's body was discovered, I mean, that's probably the first time he's heard that. And you talked with him.
It was. I asked him, and he said that was the first time he heard it. It was clearly the hardest point of the day of this, since the murder itself happened, to have to sit there and listen to that. I said, do they tip you off? Do they say maybe you should leave the court, or this might be a good time if you don't want to hear this? And he's like, no, I'm staying in court. I'm going to see this through. So he sat there and listened to that 911 call, and how awful that must have been for him too.
And we play that. I think we had that soundbite. We could, Robert.
From the father.
Yeah. Harley, it should be in that folder. We'll check back with that.
I just interviewed him at about 1:00 today as he was heading into court.
But again, I mean, he said that he's going to be in court. He's going to see it. He needs to, and really to be a witness for his father. But you also talked to him, which I thought was really good, just not making it more about the defendant, but what do you want people to realize about your daughter, and
we brought that
this terrible thing that happened to her.
Yeah, we brought that up yesterday. Just human nature. We want to know about the killer. Who is he? Why did he do it? What's his background? The suspect in this case. We want to know those back. That's just the curiosity killed the cat stuff. And we too much forget the victim in this. She was 31 years old, just had a new house, just had a promotion, had a good job, good relationship, it sounded like. And
she just become an attorney, I think?
Yeah. Her life was snatched from her at 31, And so I just wanted to ask him about his daughter. And of course, he's very proud of her. Just said she was just kind of, you could tell, the light of his life, always smiling, always positive person to be around. And think of the torch he's had to carry for 10 years to make sure that her brief 31 years on earth are not forgotten, and having to do it while going through this DNA mess for 10 years, now hearing these 911 calls through 2 months of court. It's just got to be so rough on him. Okay, I think we have a soundbite or two from Allison Feldman's father, Harley Feldman. Well, if you don't mind, sir, tell me what you thought of day one.
I felt good about what the defense did. They told a proper story, and I felt good about the testimony of Alex, and so I felt pretty good. It was a tough day, but it felt good to get it moving.
Toughest part of the day, the 911 call? Or?
Yeah, I was just I hadn't heard it before. It was hard to listen to.
Did they warn you ahead of time that you might want to step out?
Yes,
okay.
They did.
And you chose to stay?
I chose to stay. There'll be some videos and things that I won't stay for in the future, but I chose to stay yesterday.
And I know he kind of mentioned there the defense, but he meant the prosecution, right?
Right. He slipped a tongue there. But
sure.
He felt good about how the prosecution came out of the gate, laying out a lot of the big picture evidence they have on him. DNA on at the crime scene. His car spotted by, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 officers that night,
right,
who took down his license plate in the area, which they apparently do late at night. And then 1 or 2 bank deposits.
Yeah, 2. So I think the first one was at 12:38 a.m. And again, that was really the only time frame that the prosecutor Aaron Otis was presenting as far as what happened. The first one was the last time there was a timestamp for Allison Feldman around 7:15 when she came back to her house.
Her phone, was it?
I believe it was the door. So maybe
okay.
It was a security system that kind of registered door closed.
Okay.
But, in the house, 7 o'clock. And then the other one that they presented was 12:38 early that next morning. And then another deposit, I think, for around about the same amount, $1,500 later that day made into the bank. But they had laid out right that this was actually a deposit from the brother. The prosecutors did not say that this was from Allison Feldman from her house, but the defense was saying, well, no, we have an explanation for that. This was his other brother, not the one that was in prison,
right?
Who they connected the familial DNA. Another brother, an older brother. This was pretty common because of their schedules.
The prosecution kind of left that money thing hanging, as we noted, and as the defense took advantage of. We'll see if it stays that way.
I was kind of waiting for them to thread the needle just at the end of that opening statement to where, okay, where's the slam dunk of he is connected to either Allison or the boyfriend Alex because of X, Y, and Z. I didn't really feel like we got that.
The other thing I mentioned, there's no known link between the two. There's no motive that we know. There also was no sign of forced entry. Is that right? So
no.
So how did he get in there?
Alex was on the witness stand yesterday and talked about how he used the key he had for Allison's apartment, went in, unlocked the door as normal. But then again, that first thing that hit him was the smell of bleach, which he thought that's odd. And then finding her in the hallway. But there had also been evidence that the fight went from inside to outside, and then maybe who knows how it got back inside. Yeah, I mean, the picture that the prosecution painted out about the crime scene itself, it sounded pretty extensive, right? Where it was inside the home all over the place, and then outside the home were pieces of either her body or stuff that was used or, came into contamination with her body. And the struggle ended up even in the pool and stuff like that. So again, I mean, we were talking about it out of the stream yesterday. Just, you've got to think that with the homes and how they were structured there, that somebody had to hear this or whatnot. But
she's fighting for her life.
Yeah.
How can no one hear
exactly.
That?
Yeah. Not easy. But I know, again, you were asking her father again more about her life and who she was as a person and what he hoped to have happen. But
again, the 10 years we've been focusing on who did this and the DNA and is it legal to get it that way? Is it legal to use it? So all this focus is always on the killer, and I just wanted to make sure that he knew that we were also thinking about his daughter as well. Robert, if you can, play that for us. I don't want to focus this too much on the defendant. Tell me, what do you want people to remember about your daughter?
She was the best. She had so much support and had so many friends and loved what she did. And I don't know of a single person that didn't like working with her or being with her. She was just one of those really friendly, can do anything for you kinds of people.
That's great. I'm sure you have a lot of great memories.
We do.
Tell me do you mind me asking about, the defense brought up some Valley pharmacists. That hit us out of the blue. What's your take on that?
I think they're reaching. Just personal opinion. There's no DNA of his in the house, so I don't know how they get there, but they have to do what they have to do.
Have you heard any hints from the prosecution about what tactics they might try to take to get around the DNA in the house?
No, I try to stay away out of their way. I trust them. I think they're going to do a good job.
Almost done here. What do you feel your role here is as a father? You just talk me through that and why it's important for you to be here throughout this.
So I took 2 jobs when Allison was murdered. One was to help the Scottsdale police find her killer, which we did. And the second was to keep her legacy alive. And I do that by being here and representing her.
And you have no doubt that Ian Mitchell is the killer?
I have no doubt. But I'm not the jury. The jury will have to decide that.
Man.
Yeah. I mean, someone so close who's lost so much, and it's, in a way, it's out of his hands, right? I mean, It's the legal systems now.
Well, and we mentioned it's been a decade. You can see, too, just as a dad looking, another dad, man, that just what that takes away from you and how it changes you, and just your heart totally breaks for him. We have a few people weighing in the chat, and we really appreciate that. And again, any questions you have, we'd be happy to try to include those on the air. Again, we are going to have some legal experts join us later in the afternoon, so we will definitely take that to them to get your comments in. But a few people weighing in, just such a lovely man, and their hearts go out to him.
Of course. And we think today, do we not, that the boyfriend might be back up on the stand. He still needs to be cross-examined.
Yep.
And that's going to be interesting, too, because he's a victim in all of this. And
right. Which is, again, why the court asked that his face not be shown. Now, they are naming him, but not showing his face on the camera, and that's why it's a little bit over.
And going to be interesting to see how hard the defense, Ian Mitcham's defense, goes after him. That's going to kind of set the tone, right? I mean, they set the tone a little bit yesterday, but how hard are they willing to go after someone who is a secondary victim in this? That will show us a lot, I think,
right,
about how strong they think their case is, or how long this might play out. We might get a lot of hints by the end of today.
Yeah, and I mean, it is kind of fascinating always watching that tightrope that attorneys, either for the prosecution or defense, where you get someone that I think the jury can be extremely sympathetic to. Like you mentioned, this gentleman for sure is a victim in this, and the defense attorneys have not made any indication whatsoever that they wanted to take the route of, he may have had some role in this, but at the same time, where they're wanting to poke holes in the story with the prosecutors, because the boyfriend is the bridge in between her walking into that home alive and her lifeless body being discovered, where police were contacted, etc. And the defense attorneys have taken that role of like, okay, well, how can we take a little bit away from the credibility, but still not coming off as hostile and a jerk and etc. And maintaining that. It is kind of fascinating. And that's where I think a little bit of the Hollywood dramatics, can kind of play out a little bit.
And that is, I was poorly trying to get at with Harley Feldman. I didn't know how much they tip him off ahead of time. Probably not smart to do too much of that, and he understood that. But I just wondered if he had any insight into how they might try to, if the defense has tipped off to the prosecution, how they might try to tackle all of these large circumstantial and real deal on the scene DNA evidence that they have piled up already. Not to mention the familial DNA, which got us here and got us on this circuitous route for 10 years to get us to court yesterday and today. He did not know that. He said, I let them do their job, and I'm just basically a witness, not a witness, a spectator here.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the questions that we asked Benjamin Taylor, right, yesterday with, hey, as a criminal defense attorney, what is the best strategy where you're coming in, where the layman like myself or you, we're listening to this and we're hearing just all of this evidence, this forensic evidence that really, I think, right, it's been since the OJ trial where DNA first came on the scene, and we all, as a nation, kind of were captive audience to this is going to be the new tool in how we determine justice in this country. You know, that's the smoking gun. If they've got the DNA, oof, it sounds like it's a done shut case. However, we know the irony with the OJ case that clearly he was found not guilty in it. But in the subsequent years, and as you mentioned, the familial DNA, 2018, that was when the Golden State Killer was arrested and convicted based on DNA that was found in a database through one of their ancestors to connect them to the crimes in the 60s and 70s. And in this case, with Ian Mitcham, with his brother Mark Mitcham, who's been in Arizona penitentiary since, I believe, 1992. We were looking at when's his expected release date, 2135. So they had his DNA. That's really what they were able to connect initially. But going from that to where we're at today, hearing that mounting evidence, how do you even defend against it? And Benjamin Taylor was saying, well, you want to get your own experts to call into question, right. You know, how was this DNA handled? Where was it stored? Scottsdale detectives had it for quite a while. What were the conditions that was kept in? You know, where could it have possibly gotten to? And even the defense was bringing up that, well, it's a minute amount of DNA that was found at the scene, possibly. It only takes a little bit. But prosecutors were pushing back. No. It was all over the place. You know, how did it get there? I haven't heard them give an explanation about it.
And how you have two experts in the same field possibly giving different answers, or at least answering different questions. You know, if the science is the science, it's supposed to be pretty fact-based, right? You'd think they would come to the same conclusion. But I guess then you go back to, well, it depends on what questions are being asked. So if they bring in their Benjamin Taylor type defense attorney brings in his own expert on DNA, then maybe you concede DNA was found there. But like you said, it's been 10 years. There's all sorts of holes you probably, or possibilities of holes, how it was stored, how it was collected, things that could have tainted that evidence. That's what you got to go for, because you're trying to just come up with any reasonable doubt.
That's all you need, right?
And only one juror.
Exactly. Have to have all of them. Well, the other thing that Benjamin Taylor was saying, which was interesting, because not all Arizona cases are this way, but after each witness, the jury is allowed to write in a question to ask to the court. The judge will read it, and hey, we had a question about what the witness said with this or that. And then the defense and prosecution will also have the opportunity to go back and to answer some of those. But it's a really good marker for people to have an idea of, okay, what did the jury pick up? What are the weak spots in each one of the testimonies that were being given? You know, who's not necessarily making their case as well as the other? And kind of give us a tip off of where this could go and what it could come down to. Exactly.
It's because you got to think the jury gets together and they ask, you know, at some, well, maybe not at that point, but anyway, it does tip off to where their head might be, or at least one or two of them. And you got to think, if one person's thinking it, another one is too. Kind of like when we hear these Supreme Court arguments, and when the justices ask questions, we know they seem skeptical. They seem positive about this. So it gives us some headwind about where it's going. We want to remind everyone, we're going to go to this trial on day 2. As soon as it starts, it's on a 30-minute delay. So it has already started. We are waiting for the 30-minute delay to kick in, which should be any minute now. We'll get you to that as soon as it starts.
And then as we go through the afternoon, we're going to be here hanging with you, giving our thoughts when there's a little bit of a break. And then we're also going to have some legal experts join us as well to give their analysis, which we always appreciate. Judge McDonald, Always a fascinating guy, so much experience and sound legal mind, going to be joining us this afternoon for his perspective on the case, which we really
because we are not legal experts.
No,
we
we're
are not attorneys.
I'm just curious, as we're waiting here, have you ever been on a jury, Brian?
I have once.
Oh, how did that go?
It was a very interesting case study in human psyche, kind of group think. It was not a case to this level by any means. It was a repeat DUI offender, and he was an older gentleman. And it was fascinating to me because he was an older, sympathetic gentleman, a few people on the jury did not want to convict him. They did not want to convict him simply because of that. But they clearly had the evidence against this guy with his blood alcohol level, and I think it was his 5th DUI.
Wow.
They needed to get this guy off the streets. He was an alcoholic who was very dangerous behind the wheel, but it took some arm twisting to get these couple of jurors like, guys, I know he's sympathetic too. I don't want to send this guy to jail, but look at the evidence and we have to follow the law. I mean, it gets easy to get those emotions flowing.
Right.
And someone has got to be the adult in the room and say, all right, I understand too. He's a sympathetic guy, but we have to follow the law. His blood alcohol was this. It's between the margin of error.
Yeah.
It's the 5th time, on and on and on. Come on. We have a responsibility here.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I have not been on a jury, but I mean, what always goes to my mind is the 50s movie 12 Angry Men. Just wow, what a portrayal of the human condition, and
so
when people are having the same set of facts, but again, you have 12 human beings with each unique experiences that they bring into a trial, how they absorb the same information, and just all being on the same page, it can be utter pandemonium. Now, that's of course a Hollywood portrayal, but I do always like the takeaways with just it takes every person to go in to be unanimous, and that's how our system's set up. And if there's any room for reasonable doubt, again, just that one person's not wrongfully convicted.
Well, that was kind of a foreshadowing of the world we live in today, isn't it? We get a set of facts, and some people are on this side of the facts and other people are on this side of the facts.
Yeah.
They all come bombarding us through social media every day or other media outlets. And that was kind of, that was a microcosm of what can happen with a set of facts.
Right.
Are there facts anymore? Are we post facts?
Right.
People argue to this day.
It doesn't help either if, you're falling asleep in court, as I know that
juror number 6
accusation that possibly somebody was doing that. Other people say he was maybe resting his eyes.
To be fair, Kinsey Beach was in there. She said he was not sleeping.
Right.
Right. I trust Kinsey. And
she was saying that it may have just been a tactic by defense to kind of, hey, we want to throw that out there and raise it. But poor juror number 6.
Poor juror number 6. If he or she
see if they make it.
But that's a good point too. If that was a tactic, then they are willing to go anywhere and everywhere to throw any kind of shade on this trial.
Yeah, it just shows you that they're definitely playing some 3D chess. I won't dare say 40, but just using every trick and trade in the book to, hey, we want to have this go our way.
Because if for some reason, I don't think the judge would have done this based on what I've seen in court cases. I don't think the judge would have thrown out juror number 6 based on that alone.
Right.
But let's say that was, he did something else. Okay, we got rid of one juror.
Yeah, we got
now we're going through the alternates, and if they go through the alternates, correct me if I'm wrong, you got a hung jury.
Could have a mistrial.
And then what happened? Mistrial, and then you got to start over.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating just to see what they're going to take, what they're not going to take. So, yeah, a lot there. Well,
have they started yet? Are we on? Not quite yet.
That's it. Okay. Well, we are actually seeing on the live feed that they did join in for just a moment, and there was some discussion in the court. So we are still waiting for that. We'll take you there, and then again, right back to the witness stand where we're in this. And now, when you talked to Harley Feldman and you were asking about how long this could potentially go, what was his response?
I was shocked. I said a few weeks, maybe a month, and he was like, "I've heard it could go to the end of January." And then he brought up, of course, we got to deal with Thanksgiving and Christmas. Okay, so there's a couple of weeks or several days in there that they won't be able to do this, and New Year's, of course. But so where are we at? We're in mid-November.
Yeah,
looking at 2.5 months, maybe.
Well, and Thanksgiving's coming up. You know, and then Christmas,
right?
Then New Year's. I mean, it's going to be quite the ordeal. But
not a good time. I mean, can you imagine that too? You're plugging along. Maybe one side or the other feels like they've got the upper hand, like a football game,
right?
And then all of a sudden something goes wrong, and we have to take a break, halftime or whatever it is, and then you lose your momentum, maybe, or the jury can't. What were they saying at the end of the break before we left for Christmas? I can't quite remember. I wonder if they have to go back and rehash some of that or not.
Well, that's a look into court right now. See the defense attorney talking with the judge. Let's go there and take a listen.
At the end, when it gets quiet, I make one more statement to Ian, and you can hear that very clearly on that. And that one is on law and crime. You can hear it there. The focus is on the seal of Arizona. The issue, I think, is the microphones are all hot all the time. And as I understood, that even when FTR is not on, the microphones are still hot and they're picking up conversations that we are having as a team, as well as with our clients. So there's a Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment problem here in due process under the Arizona Constitution, that Ian's being prevented from having a fair trial because he's not adequately able to communicate with his defense team because of the presence of the media and the live feed that's going through, and they're mic'd up. So we have to change what we're doing in order for him to have a fair trial, and that's just not right. And the Fifth and Sixth Amendment trump the First Amendment when there is a conflict. Additionally, this courtroom, while lovely in its remodel, is just not adequate for a capital trial. There are other courtrooms in the South Court Tower. I know this court's made inquiries as to whether those would be available for that. But you can see the jurors as they sit here. Juror number, I think 9, he's cramped against the bar and he's kind of turned. It's not adequate for the jury. And also, each of us has 4 people at counsel table, and we are constantly banging into each other. It's hard for us to even get out to have a bench conference, and this courtroom just is not adequate for counsel at table. It's just not big enough for all of us. Additionally, because the media is so close, they're right on us. You can see in many of the live feeds our computer screens. And when the witness is on, you can see the states. You can see Mr. Roseberry's. So this is a problem for all of us. So they're having work product issues. We're having work product. We're having issues amongst them. So the problem that I see is this room was not designed for what's happening today. And our office, and as well the county attorney's office, was involved in the design for the South Court Tower. And this type of case is exactly what should be over there. That being said, there's additional protections that South Court Tower has. There's media rooms, so they can set up and they can adjust the audio. I'm told that they can't even turn off our microphone. You just reaffirmed that. These are problems that we have, and how do we actively represent our clients? There's a victim room, which I don't know the victim's position, but they would have their privacy. They could observe everything, and they have a place to go. So the South Court Tower is a far better place for this. That's the first issue.
Okay. Did you want me to try to address those points before you move on to the next one? I don't know if it's related or if it's completely different.
It's completely different.
Can I just add something really quick?
Go ahead.
Just as an example, Judge, I was just having a private conversation with what I thought was a private conversation with my client. I had my finger on this. But apparently, if you're not careful enough or don't put it a certain way, the whole time it was green, and I didn't realize that till Jeff pointed that out to me. So it's just really frustrating because now we're having to look to make sure the light is on as I'm speaking to my client. I just wanted to add that.
Okay. So just for the record, I did see when you pressed it, it turned red. So obviously that means it's off at that point. And those microphones will work the same way in the South Court Tower. So you still have to press them to shut them off. So I don't think there's any difference in terms of that issue.
My experience was different, Your Honor.
Okay.
But
and I'm happy to look into that, but my understanding is it's kind of rigged the same way and that you have to shut it off.
And my understanding is that this setup is different audio-wise than the South Court Tower is. And you have your media person in here who's probably a better person to answer those questions. My request is that, one, that if the camera is going to interfere with the trial, then it shouldn't be here. So I know the court's made their ruling. I'm saying that it's changed now. We've had a day, it's changed. And the second thing I would ask is that the courts make a further inquiry. As you see, we have tons of exhibits and it's getting really cramped, and it's hard to try a case in here. So I would ask the court to make an inquiry as to whether there's a possibility that we have something on the 5th floor where there's 2 counsel tables. I mean, even though we don't have dual juries, but one of those courtrooms would be far better suited. Even though the acoustics aren't as great, I'll make do to have a little bit of room, so I'm not backing into the bar, or, Martha's not backing into me, and that we can try this case adequately. So I'd ask that the court make an inquiry into if we can move courtrooms.
And when you say 5th floor, you're talking about this building or South
Court Tower?
Okay.
South Court Tower, Your Honor. And I think that's what I was talking about with the victims' rooms and the media rooms, that they're available, and then the camera's out of the way. Everybody's out of the way. Everybody has their own space.
Okay. One thing I want to know about anything that was filmed yesterday, I've issued an order that's not to be used going forward for any type of feed. It should be taken down. So I'll work with our communications team to reach out to any of those outlets or agencies and make sure if it's posted somewhere. You mentioned YouTube, for example, that we have that portion taken down where any conversations during a break was recorded. And the press understands that, they can't do that going forward. They will unplug it during all the breaks. So that should take care of that particular issue. With respect to the microphones, again, I've been told you have to hold it down so it turns red and then it will not pick up your conversations. I believe it's the same in South Court Tower because it does have to be on so that when you're speaking into it, we can all hear you. So it doesn't completely shut off is my understanding. I'm happy to look into that, but that's how it's set up in here. And then with respect to the computers, from my perspective, I will order that no computer screens should be in the shot. So I don't know if that's possible for our press team. I'm seeing nodding heads. So, okay, thank you. So it looks like that they can make sure that they are not getting anyone's screen in the shot. So that might be maybe just lifting up the camera a little bit higher in terms of its vantage point. So again, I appreciate your concerns. I do want to address all of them to the best of my ability. I don't know that we have courtrooms available. I made that inquiry originally. Obviously, everyone is using their courtrooms for trials. And there's a large number of trials going, given the number of capital trials that are taking various divisions offline for 7 months, basically, for lack of a better term. So I know people are very busy and using their courtrooms so that, because what we've been told is if you are assigned to a CCB judge, the intent is that the case should be tried here. And again, I'm happy to kind of try to make whatever accommodations we can, as I just did, directing to make sure there's no screens in the shot, making sure that everyone is muted while we're in session. When we're not in session, they're going to unplug, so there'll be absolutely no recording, and FTR is off as well when we're not in session. So I think all of those things can alleviate the things that you were discussing. And regarding just it being cramped in here, I do apologize for that, but we typically have 18 seats in the box in all trials, so that's normal. We've just added one at the end for 19. So right before this trial, we had a trial with 18 jurors. So that hasn't been an issue in the past.
And I appreciate the court recognizing that I have to make a record
Yes.
in these cases. I appreciate the court giving me that time. The other issues, kind of twofold from the media stuff and also into what happened in the courtroom. As the courts recognized yesterday, juror number 6 had his eyes closed in the court. I made the inquiry, or I let the court know, and the court, put her observations on that. In looking at some of the cases that I saw, I don't know that that's adequate, and I think that's the way to do that, to kind of figure out what he was doing, is not to be presumptuous on our part, to actually bring him in and question him. But I don't want to question him, I haven't talked to Ms. Otis, but
sure.
If the court could just, hey, we noticed that you had your eyes closed during some parts of yesterday. Were you sleeping? Were you able to do whatever the court
Yes.
makes that inquiry? Because I don't want to alienate any juror by that. Now, the second part of that was on the comments, and in the videos of the live feed, you can hear me talking to my team about juror number 6. And there's comments below from the public about juror number 6, making that. I didn't watch all the news yesterday. Frankly, I'm trying to get the media out of this trial. But if any juror or anybody from the family recognizes that, we're calling out juror number 6 for sleeping. That's a problem. And, with Ian's life in his hands, I don't want to upset any juror or make it so that, there's a problem. We need to find out if he's actually able to be a juror in this case, is what I'm trying to say, Judge,
Sure.
without having to embarrass him or do anything else like that.
So, question for you. Would you like me to bring him in now, or would you like to wait till the end of the day and see how he does this afternoon? Because I think just to kind of keep things moving, and to your point, not unnecessarily draw attention to it, I think it's something maybe we could tackle this afternoon at the end. And if it is the case that it is an issue, then, we'll resolve it at that point. But I'm happy to ask those questions.
And it's hard because I need to preserve this. And if he sits and listens to the evidence today, I might make 2 motions. So my preference would be now, but
Okay, folks, stick with us. The feed froze there for a second, but, Brian, I thought this was interesting. There's a lot of back and forth. They're not happy. The defense is not happy with where this court is taking place at the Jefferson Street Courthouse.
He's throwing everything but the kitchen sink at this on day 1 and 2.
Yeah, he wants to move to the South Court Tower building, saying that, hey, this is inadequate size for us. We're bumping into each other. The jury box doesn't have enough seats, but the judge, was pushing back there a lot, saying, hey, there's 18 seats, one more for another alternate. But I think the biggest back and forth was over like the communications and whatnot, where they were saying that screens could be possibly read, but I think the microphone issue, which in full transparency, we did hear a little bit of the back and forth. Now, we couldn't really tell who was talking at the time. I think we thought it was the judge was having a discussion with one of the assistants that were there in court, but couldn't really make out kind of what was going on. But that is definitely a worry with court cases where we have the advent of television and now streaming, where we're inside court, where there are things that the jury shouldn't be privy to hear, but they can come out in a live stream, etc., that can kind of weigh the scales a little bit.
That was during a break yesterday where we could hear some shuffling and some soft-spoken words. We couldn't, as you said, tell who or what was said. But these microphones are getting better every day, and so that is a concern.
And the judge has the absolute obligation to try to preserve the integrity of the court and the trial. And
I thought she handled it well. She seemed to be listening and trying to be as accommodating as possible, although letting us know that there are many many other capital cases going on right now in other courtrooms, and you can't just willy-nilly move around to other courtrooms. And she laid it out that this courtroom is kind of what you get here in Phoenix, Arizona.
Well, and she made the point yesterday, too, that, this case has garnered extreme public interest. It's been one that's been hanging in the court system for 10 years, just as we have people watching right now on YouTube from all across the country and, other countries as well. They're interested in wanting to know, okay, what's justice going to be like in this case? And we have the novel difference in this one with the familial DNA being a factor. What are the ramifications going to be for other cases in Arizona and across country?
And the defense attorney came out and said, in no uncertain terms, I want the media out of this trial.
Yeah. I don't want the media covering it. And I think we're making a few shots at even us.
He might have been talking about us, about juror number 6.
Right. One of the motions that he made with the juror number 6, right, with having their eyes closed. So, again, I mean, they're going to make it in court. We're going to talk about it.
We don't want to joke too much about it, but we have mentioned juror number 6 yesterday. The defense accused this juror, we don't know male or female, do we, of sleeping. Our Kinsey Beach, our reporter, was in the courtroom and said, no, the juror was not sleeping.
Right.
That she saw that plainly.
And the judge said, I couldn't really tell one way or the other.
Right.
Kind of, I'm going to let it go.
I'm going to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
But then today, the defense attorney was saying that people are making a thing out of it, which could be us. We're not trying to make light of it, although it was kind of an interesting sidebar note that already on day one, a juror might be sleeping, which apparently did not turn out to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we have a few of you weighing in Citrus Bloom. We appreciate those comments coming in, but you're exactly right. Defense is setting up for a mistrial period. It sure seems like that.
Absolutely right. I mean, if you wonder why it's going to take until the end of January, we're seeing it right now. He's complaining about computers, audio issues, IT issues. The room's too small.
Yep. What's the live stream? What's the poll camera? What are the press able to see?
Juror number 6, he was sleeping. That was the complaint yesterday. Now the complaint is we don't want to embarrass him and get him maybe not on our side, him or her on our side anymore. I mean, my God, that's his job. That's his job.
Right.
So
and that's what you want in a criminal defense attorney. You want
Mitcham's like, I hired the right guy.
Kitchen sink and use every trick in the book.
So that's why we're going to be here for a while.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing to note too, folks that are watching on this stream is that we are on a 30-minute delay. That is pretty common with the Maricopa County justice system, where we had the Lori Vallow Daybell trial that just happened recently a few months ago. We were also on a 30-minute delay. Of course, that wasn't a capital murder trial, but still similar set of circumstances as far as just a violent crime that took place. But in this particular case, we do have access here at Fox 10 in our studios to see a live view of what's going on in court. So Brian and I can allude to that a little bit. We have a lot of our team working behind the scenes to help us with the updates of, hey, did you guys miss this big thing happened? But just want to give a little bit of forewarning what we're going to be in store for in a little bit when the feed comes back. It will be on the seal. Now, Allison Feldman's boyfriend will be resuming his testimony, but the audio is going to be coming through. But just as the defense asked, they wanted the court camera to be focused on that. So you didn't see any screens coming through and anything that might not want to go out in the press. But looks like they're trying to get it back in order. So just bear with us a little bit. I think they're still getting set up.
There we go. Back to the seal. And we're a slave to the cell phone service, in this business.
And yes, Citrus Bloom weighing in that Trenton and Brian are causing trouble in the courtroom. I will say innocent until proven guilty. Yes.
We might want to line up a good defense attorney at some point. You never know.
Exactly.
Never hurts to have an attorney in your corner.
No,
I'm guessing.
Definitely not. But yeah, let's go back to court again. Bear with us, folks, as the audio is going to be happening. If there's a moment for us to, weigh in a little bit about what's being said, we'll do that, and also take your questions and comments.
We're right here with you.
Please be seated. Let the record reflect we are back in the presence of the jury. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for making it back here on time this afternoon, and thank you for your patience as we get started. And let the record reflect we have Mr. Alex Stone on the stand, who continues to be under oath, and I will turn it over to the state to continue their direct examination of this witness.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Alex.
Good afternoon.
Just have a little bit more with you. There's a couple follow-up questions I want to ask you regarding Allison's house.
Of course.
Yesterday, I showed you what's already been admitted as exhibit number 58. Do you recall this photograph?
I do.
Okay. And you mentioned that this was a photograph that you had taken on Valentine's Day.
Yes, it is correct.
Okay. I want to ask you, kind of like I did with another photograph previously, kind of looking beyond the Valentine's Day stuff that you indicated you had purchased to her. Are you able to see kind of the kitchen area of Allison's home in this photograph?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And is this an accurate kind of depiction of how her kitchen would typically look?
Yes, it is.
Was she a very clean person?
Very clean and neat person.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so would her kitchen kind of look like it appears in this picture on a regular basis?
Yes, it would.
I wanted to ask you about something else. This was Exhibit 66, which has also been admitted. Do you recognize that what's in that photograph?
It's a mirror.
Okay. Two things, I think. Do you see something in the reflection of the mirror?
I do.
Okay. And do you recognize that item?
It's a dry rack. Dry rack.
Do you recognize the items on the dry rack?
I do. Yes.
Who do they belong to?
Belong to Allison.
Okay. And do you remember during your time at the house where that dry rack was typically kept?
I don't exactly.
Okay. That's fine. And you mentioned that there's a mirror also in this photograph. Recollection of what area of the house that mirror typically would be found?
In the picture, it is right in front of the sliding door to go to the backyard, but oftentimes it would be in bedroom. But there was a real particular spot for it in the house.
Okay. Did it move around at times?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Another question that I have for you about the house is yesterday we looked at exhibit number 51, which is already admitted, and you mentioned that you believed that there might have been, I think you called it like a mat or a rug in front of the sliding glass door. Do you recall that portion of your testimony?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 14. Do you recognize that?
Maybe, but not. I don't exactly recall.
Okay. Let me ask you this, Alex. When you mentioned that there was a mat or rug in front of the door, do you have any recollection of what that looked like?
Yeah, I mean, it was light. It was a similar color to the one that you just showed me. I just don't 100% recall if this is the rack that I remember, but it was, lighter, neutral color, and it would oftentimes be outside the sliding door.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, your recollection of the rug is similar to the one I showed you, but you can't be certain that the one that I actually showed you was in fact that same rug. Okay. During the time that you spent at Allison's house, do you have any recollection of the way that her couch appeared?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Did Allison keep any type of blankets, if you recall, on the couch?
Yes.
Tell us what you remember about that.
I mean, depending on the day, one to, several blankets would be on the couch.
Do you recall any blankets ever being on the top portion of the couch? Remember the
Light color, gray or cream or something like that. It would go with the feng shui of the house, so to speak. That's what you called it.
Okay. And then I also want to ask you about another photo. However, it is not on my computer. But first, I'm going to approach, this has been marked as Exhibit 139 for identity. Do you recognize that, what's depicted in that photo?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize it?
It is Allison's nightstand with some waters and jewelry box and the pink tulips that I got her.
And does that photo accurately depict the way you recall that nightstand looking the last time you had been at Allison's?
I mean, I recall the items there on top of it. I don't particularly recall it being open or, anything of that sort.
Okay. This time the state moves for admission Exhibit 139.
And the defense has seen 139, correct?
Yes.
Any objection? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No objection.
Thank you. It's ordered admitting Exhibit 139 into evidence.
And permission to publish, Judge.
You may.
I don't have to do anything with this. Okay. So, Alex, you mentioned earlier in your testimony yesterday that for Valentine's Day you had purchased 2 bouquets. I think we saw that on the counter of pink tulips. And you mentioned one for the kitchen and one for the bedroom.
I did.
Is this what you're referring to that's in the photograph?
Exactly
Okay.
it.
And then yesterday I was asking you about where you believed Allison kept jewelry. And you mentioned something about a nightstand. Is this what you recall, or that jewelry box that you mentioned, is that what you recall regarding where she kept some of her jewelry?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. Allison and some of her habits. Let me ask you this, Alex. We've talked about the sliding glass door. Was Allison a person who used to like to leave the door open, the sliding glass door open?
She was. She truly enjoyed having fresh air in the home when the weather permitted it.
Is that something that you saw her do on more than one occasion?
Yes, I have.
Another follow-up question I have is, during your testimony yesterday, you mentioned when you arrived at Allison's, the day that you found her, that you had noticed the odor, and then you mentioned something about seeing the couch moved in a particular position. Do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's already been admitted as exhibit number 64. Does that look familiar to what you, is that familiar to what you saw when you entered Allison's house on February 18th?
Yes.
Is that the way that the couch typically looked when you were in Allison's house?
No, it would not.
Yesterday we discussed in your testimony that you had been interviewed multiple times by the Scottsdale Police Department over the course of a few years. Do you remember that part of your testimony?
Yes, I do.
And on one of those occasions, did detectives from Scottsdale Police Department discuss with you a trip that you took with Allison to Paris?
Yes, it was discussed a few times.
Okay, so I'd like to talk to you about that.
Of course.
First of all, during your relationship, did you go on a trip to Paris with Allison?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us when you recall that trip happened?
It was in October.
2014?
2014, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm sure you did lots of things on the trip, and we don't need to go through all of these things. There's a particular reason I'm asking you about this. Do you recall during your trip to Paris with Allison a situation where she believed some money was missing?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Towards the end of the trip, as a matter of fact, the night before we were supposed to come back home, I was informed that there may be some cash missing. I was unaware that there was any cash on hand that Allison brought with, and we tried to address the situation by looking for what appeared to be missing, and that was the proper authorities were contacted, hotels management staff were contacted, and so forth. Proper documentation was executed, and we finished packing and got into a vehicle and went on to the airport to head home.
Okay. Now let me ask you a little bit more about this cash and the situation.
Sure.
Did this situation kind of involve a Chanel purse?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us kind of how the Chanel purse fits into this story.
I got drugged into a Chanel boutique in Paris, which was Allison's idea and something that she wanted for a long time, and we did some shopping there, and she ended up buying a Chanel purse, and we went on with the rest of the trip. It was great, and the same Chanel purse was in a bag that I ended up taking through an entire flight on the way home.
Okay. Now this particular Chanel purse, were you present when she purchased it?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall how she paid for it?
I'm fairly certain it was paid via card.
Okay. And then you mentioned, so she buys this purse, she pays for it with a card, and then during the trip at some point, right before you're supposed to head back home to the United States, I'm guessing is what you mean, yes?
That is correct.
Allison believes that money is missing.
Correct.
Okay. And I think from understanding your testimony, you said you were unaware that she had money on her.
I was unaware that she had that kind of money on her.
Okay. And did you ever find out the amount of money that she had on her?
No.
Okay. And so at some point, this purse is bought. You seem to be the guy that carried it through the airport on the way home. And then during your time at the hotel, you mentioned that she believed money was missing, and so you notified authorities to file something. Is that correct?
Correct. I've inquired as to what the proper protocol and procedure is for something like that, and it is what was discussed among her and I, and we decided to move forward and contact the hotel management, which was Marriott Hotel Management, and we filed appropriate documentation and what was needed in order to properly record and put on record what has taken place.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, before you left Paris to come home, was that money ever located?
No, I was not told, or Allison never said to me money were located. We packed our, we finished packing and, barely made it onto our flight to come home.
Okay. And then you come home.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes for the court report?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
At some point then, do you get notified by Allison about this money?
Yes, I did.
And where were you when she notified you about the money? Do you recall?
I don't recall exactly, but she did make me aware that the money was found, and she told me where the money was found, and she said that the money were inside the Chanel purse that I bravely took all the way from Paris to Phoenix.
And when Allison found this money in the Chanel purse, where was she?
Home, I'm assuming.
You weren't at the house when you weren't there with her when she found it.
No, I was not.
If I'm understanding correct. Okay. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is during your time with Allison, did you ever go to a Walgreens with her to fill any prescriptions?
I may have. I don't exactly recall, but we have done shopping and things of that sort together multiple times.
Did Allison ever complain to you about anyone that worked at the pharmacy during your relationship?
No.
Do you know a guy named James Castellaminas?
No.
The last thing I think I want to ask you about, Alex, as we wrap up here is when you introduced yourself to the jury yesterday, you stated your name was Alex Stone, and then you said formally, if I butcher this, I apologize, Socodolo? Fairly
Well
close?
said. Very
okay.
close.
Thank you. At some point, Alex, did you change your name?
Yes, I did.
And when did you do that?
I did that in 2016.
And can you tell us why?
It was actually one of the hardest decisions I ever made. The amount of pressure, the amount of negative attention that I have received since 17th of February of 2015 was quite large. the negative attention has affected my relationships with multiple friends, business colleagues, my career, and some other relationships in my life. And upon multiple discussions and communication with people I love and care for, I decided to move forward and change my last name.
And when you were talking about negative attention and things like that, are you talking about stuff that was online?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Was it based on the perception that people were pointing the finger at you for this?
Yes, correct.
I can just have one moment.
You may.
I don't have anything additional. Thank you, Alex.
And at this time, I will turn it over to the defense for your cross-examination of this witness whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. May I refer to you as Alex?
Please.
Thank you. Alex, today I want to talk to you about two things mainly, your relationship with Allison and also the way the Scottsdale Police Department investigated you after her death.
Okay.
You testified that you met Allison on a dating app in April of 2014, correct?
Yes, I did.
Do you recall what dating app that was?
Tinder.
Tinder. To your knowledge, was Allison on any other dating apps at the time?
No idea.
Okay. You testified that you and Allison started seeing each other pretty regularly soon after meeting, correct?
Yes.
And the relationship became serious fairly quickly.
I wouldn't say quickly.
After a couple months.
Relationship progressed naturally and became exclusive in June, I believe I stated.
Okay. And a few months into the relationship, you provided Allison with some financial advice relating to a condo that she previously owned. Do you recall that?
I wouldn't call it financial advice. It was just a discussion about regular life things.
Okay. So discussion about finances.
Discussion about real estate, to be specific.
And Allison followed your advice, correct?
No idea what she did or did not. It's not something that was really discussed in detail. So.
And then 6 months into the relationship, you said you went to Paris together. That was October of 2014.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Is it fair to say that trip brought you guys a little closer as a couple?
Absolutely.
At some point, you guys talked about you possibly joining her for a work trip in the Bahamas. Do you recall that?
I do.
I want to talk to you briefly about the home security system. You testified that you had several conversations with Allison about getting a security alarm installed, correct?
Something that she have entertained getting, and as a natural progression, as a discussion within a relationship, those conversations and discussions have taken place, yes.
Sounds like you were encouraging her to get the alarm system for some time.
I encouraged her to be safe and to be comfortable.
And eventually she listened. Allison didn't always have the alarm set while she was at home. Is that correct?
Oftentimes she did, oftentimes she didn't.
There were times that she didn't have it set, though.
Yes.
And you testify that she would sometimes leave the doors unlocked if she was home because she liked to allow fresh air into the house, correct?
That is correct.
And I think you told the detectives that you thought the alarm system was a good idea because she was a beautiful single woman living by herself. Do you recall that?
Not exactly, but that sounds like a very smart advice. If the roles were reversed, I would take it.
That was something that worried you.
Yes.
And so even though her neighborhood looks safe, you wanted Allison to be more careful about locking the doors and using the alarm.
I'm not sure what definition of safe is, counselor, but, being safe and being protective were certainly my concern for her at all times.
Understood. And I want to discuss a little bit about the layout of her house and the neighborhood in general.
Sure.
The layout of her house made it easy for someone to access her garage or the inside of her home from the backyard, correct?
I don't know about easy.
So I'm going to refer to the exhibit number 50, which the state previously had admitted.
Sure.
Is the door to the right, is that the door you testified about that leads directly into her laundry room?
The door on the right, the white door, yes, correct.
And then once you go through the laundry room, that leads directly into her kitchen?
Correct.
Okay. And that door can be accessed through her backyard, correct?
Correct.
You could also, so there's the other door that you talked about that has a latch. That door leads directly into her garage, correct?
I wouldn't call it a door. I would call it a gate.
Or the gate. Let's call it a gate. That leads directly into her garage?
That is correct.
Okay. So the only thing that separates the garage and the backyard was this latch gate that is in Exhibit 50, correct?
Yes.
So someone entering the garage from the backyard would be able to see how many vehicles are inside.
Counselor, can you please repeat the question?
Yes. So if someone entered the garage from the backyard, they would be able to see how many cars are parked inside.
They could. I can't be certain. I don't recall.
If you open the latch.
Seeing if I can or can't. It's been nearly 11 years ago. But if I were to open the latch, yes, I'll be able to see exactly how many cars are in the garage.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. What door did Allison use more often to get inside her house? Would it be that side door that leads into her laundry room or the front door of the house?
I can't really be certain. I was not at home with Allison 24/7.
Understood.
So I would imagine if she was coming home while driving a vehicle, she would use the gate to the garage, and I would assume that the side door that's on the right.
Which door did you use? Which door did you use more often when you were with her?
I don't really recall. I used the front door and I used the garage door.
Alex, another thing that concerned you was Allison posting on social media about her frequent work travels. You recall discussing that with detectives?
Not particularly, but she did enjoy travel, and one of the many things that we've connected on is the fact that she was a globetrotter. So,
and I think what was concerning to you when you discussed this was that this could alert someone that she wasn't home often.
It could have.
And in fact, you tried to discourage her from doing that. Do you recall that?
Not exactly, but it sounds something that I may have talked about or have suggested, all things given, considering safety and security of my girlfriend.
You cared about Allison's safety and felt a responsibility to protect her, correct?
I did.
I want to talk about the location of her home specifically. Her home was on a small residential street off of Earl, correct?
Yes.
This is not a main street?
No, not a main street.
Okay. And Allison would often swim in her backyard pool, correct?
I wouldn't say often.
She would use her pool at times.
She would.
And sometimes alone.
Not so sure about that.
Her backyard, it faces an alley, correct?
Yes.
And the brick wall separating her house from the alley was approximately 4 feet high?
I do not recall, Counselor. I did not measure her walls in her backyard.
Okay. Was it most backyard walls are about 6 foot high? Do you recall it being a little shorter than most?
I do not, Counselor.
Could someone walking or driving through the alley look inside to the backyard?
Not necessarily, from what I recall, but it has been 11 years since I've been in the home, so.
I'm going to show you another picture that was previously admitted, Exhibit 51, and the Arcadia door, and that's the window to her kitchen, correct?
Mm-hmm. The window on the left?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And those didn't have any blinds or curtains on them?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So you would be able to see, if you're outside, you would be able to see to certain parts of the house from the outside?
You could.
And this alley, did it have the big dumpsters where you would throw the trash in?
Yeah, as every other alley.
Do you recall what the trash collection schedule was at that time?
No, I do not.
Did you ever notice people walking in the alley?
Not really. We weren't frequent, alley checkers, for what it's worth.
Your sister Marina had planned to visit you and Allison Valentine's Day weekend. She was going to stay with you guys at Allison's house, not yours, correct?
Correct. Allison offered.
Do you know if Allison ended up leaving Marina the house key under the front door mat?
I don't recall exactly.
Okay. Were you aware of their discussions about that?
I was aware of some discussions, quote-unquote, girly discussions.
Specifically about her leaving her key in case she came.
I don't specifically recall.
You talked about the Chanel purse. To your knowledge, was that purse missing from the home after this happened?
After what happened?
After Allison was killed in her home. Do you know if the purse went missing?
I do not know.
A few questions about the AFC championship game that you talked about yesterday.
Yes.
So you testified that you guys watched the game at, you and Allison hosted the game at her house, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And you testified that a plethora of friends brought food and drinks to share.
Yes.
Do you recall about how many people were there that night?
I do not, Counselor.
And you and Allison purchased things for the party as well?
It was properly hosted, yes.
Do you recall where you obtained the items from? What store?
I do not.
Okay. What stores did Allison typically shop at for groceries?
From what I recall, Fry's, Walmart, maybe Sprouts. I know her and I have been to Sprouts a few times.
Do you recall what Fry's locations or the general area?
No idea.
What about the Walmart?
I'm assuming ones that are closer to her home, but I don't particularly recall.
You don't recall the cross streets?
I do not.
Do you recall what Walgreens she used to pick up her prescriptions?
No, I do not.
But these stores were generally located near her home?
I'm assuming so.
You guys ate out pretty frequently, correct?
Depends on your definition of frequently, but we have gone out to eat
okay.
often.
And when you guys would go out to eat, was it generally in the Scottsdale area near her home?
Not necessarily.
Sometimes you guys would do takeout as well?
Sure.
Okay. Chinese food, like the new China Gate?
It's one of the places, yes, that I recall.
In December of 2014, you and Allison talked about going to the Scottsdale Gun Club. Do you recall that?
Not particularly, but could have been discussed.
Was she considering getting a gun? Did she ever discuss that with you?
Not that I recall. She wasn't really a fan of firearms or guns or anything of that sort.
Okay. And this is, so when you guys had some discussions about guns, this is what she expressed to you?
To the best of my knowledge.
Okay. You later learned that she was looking at stun guns online. Do you recall that?
Not particularly.
Alex, you testified that you were taken to the police station for an interview shortly after finding Allison's body, correct?
Yes.
You were interviewed for hours.
I was interviewed.
And you were extremely emotional during that interview.
Who wouldn't?
And despite how you felt, you did your best to answer all of the police officers' questions, correct?
I believe I did.
The police collected your clothing.
Yes, I believe so.
They photographed you head to toe.
I believe so, yes.
They took your DNA.
That is correct.
And then the following day, they came to your house and they asked a lot of the same questions they asked you the day before, correct?
I don't know about exactly the same questions, but the questions were asked and I permitted it.
And then the police returned to your house about a week later.
I don't know exactly when they have recalled, but they have. And once again, I've permitted it.
Okay. And they asked you a lot of the same repetitive questions or additional questions that they thought of the next time they saw you.
I mean, they've asked questions that they felt needed answers, Counselor. I don't particularly recall if they were the same or if they were different. But
you gave them your car keys?
I gave them openly whatever it is they asked for. Just about.
And they took your vehicle to search it, correct?
If I recall correctly, yes.
They searched your phone?
I believe so.
And throughout all of this, you did your best to cooperate fully, correct?
I believe so.
And even after you consented to many of these searches, the police still obtained your financial records, correct?
I am assuming so.
Your bank records, credit card statements.
Again, I'm assuming so.
They looked at your email accounts.
I'm assuming so.
Your employment records.
I'm not an attorney, nor am I part of Scottsdale Police Department, but again, I'm assuming so.
Same with your school records.
Perhaps.
They talked to your family.
I don't necessarily think so, but maybe.
You don't recall them talking to your sister?
Perhaps they have. Again, I don't specifically recall.
They spoke to your roommate?
Yes.
Your friends?
Yes, they have.
Co-workers? And even
I'm assuming so.
And even people you've dated in the past, correct?
Sure. And again, I'm assuming so. I was never given details on who was connected or talked to.
Understood. In short, the detectives examined nearly every aspect of your personal life. Would you agree?
I don't really know what they examined. I was never told the specifics.
You talked to them at least 8 separate times over the years. Does that sound about right?
I don't recall the exact number of times that I have discussed what needs to be discussing with Scottsdale Police Department counselor.
The investigation didn't end in a few days. Is it fair to say?
It is fair to say, correct.
Took a couple years.
It is fair to say, correct.
And during this more than 2-year period, you continued to take their calls.
I have.
You met with them in person.
I have.
You answered a lot of the same questions over and over.
I've answered their questions.
You recall describing that you felt poked and prodded by law enforcement's repeated contacts?
I mean, they were doing their job, and
but you didn't know what was
job.
You didn't know what was going to happen to you the next day, correct?
I mean, I didn't do anything wrong, so I provided and cooperated the best way I knew how.
And you experienced all this while you were grieving the loss of Allison?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that the Scottsdale Police Department devoted a substantial amount of time and resources to investigate you?
Counselor, I really don't know what substantial amount of resource and time is, but I have connected with them on a number of times and have cooperated the best way I knew how.
One moment.
No further questions.
All right.
And redirect by the state whenever you're ready.
I believe, have a couple. You were asked about which door you would frequently use when you came over to Allison's by defense counsel. Do you recall that question?
Yes, I do.
I think you mentioned that you've used both doors.
Exactly. Yes, I have.
Were there times that you parked in the garage?
Yes.
Are those the times where you would use that door that we saw in Exhibit 50? Is that when you would use that door?
Yes, I would use the gate to get in the backyard and use the side door to get in the home through the lunchroom. Yes.
And when you would park in the garage, when you would park in the driveway, like we saw earlier in one of the photographs, what door would you typically use when you would park there?
I would typically use the front door.
You were asked about your sister potentially visiting during Valentine's weekend. Do you recall that question?
I do.
Okay. Did your sister ever come?
I really do not recall if she did or did not. I believe she did.
You believe she did?
Maybe not again, like it was just so long ago. As I think about it, I don't think it worked out due to her change of plans and things of that nature.
Okay.
So.
Well, let me ask you this. That Valentine's Day that you described in a lot of detail for us, do you recall your sister being in your house that night?
In Allison's house or my house?
In Allison's house.
No, she was not there.
Okay. For Valentine's Day, do you recall Allison being gone on one of her work trips? That Friday before, on the 13th?
Could be. I mean, she had a business trip pretty much every week.
Okay. Do you have any specific memory of that particular day?
Not exactly.
Okay. I want to ask you a couple questions about the party that you talked about.
Sure.
So you mentioned that it was the AFC Championship game and that you and Allison hosted at her house, correct?
Yes, it was.
Do you recall what month that was?
January.
January?
Yeah.
Do you remember around what time in January that was?
I mean, championship game, AFC game. I don't particularly recall the exact time. I mean, a weekend.
A weekend. Okay, let me ask you this. So, you found Allison February 18th, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the weekend before that was Valentine's weekend, we've established.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember how many weeks before Valentine's Day weekend that party was?
Counselor, I don't exactly remember the date, but AFC Championship usually falls in the same, give or take the same time, the same weekend. So a week or two prior.
Okay. So you just remember, so would that be sometime in late January?
It would be in late January. I'm assuming yes.
Okay.
It usually is in late January. But again, I don't recall the exact date.
Okay. Okay. I don't have anything else. Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if anyone has a question for this witness, we would collect it at this time. And seeing none, may this witness be excused, subject to recall.
Yes.
All right, you may step down, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, looks like we're taking a little bit of a break in this murder trial, day 2, and it was cross-examination day for the boyfriend. What was your take on his demeanor? I wouldn't call him difficult, but he certainly wasn't giving anything more than they asked.
I think you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the prosecution had talked to him ahead of time, a little bit of coaching of,
sure,
hey, here's how we need to answer the questions that could be happening, and had a little bit of strategy coming in. But I thought it was interesting, too, with the prosecution and how they were setting up, talking about a few things that maybe possibly that they saw as pitfalls in the future, with some cash that was missing on a trip to Europe and Paris. And then getting straight to the heart of the matter with what the defense was claiming about this Walgreens employee. Did Allison have any recollection of meeting this person or knowing them? Had it ever come up in a conversation? To which he emphatically said, like, no, I have no idea who this guy is, because they named him repeatedly in court again. So that was interesting. But
they seem to be picking apart their relationship a little bit, or wanting to know how close they were or were not a little bit. Maybe they're lining up something that
you mean the defense attorney when
the
during
defense attorney asking the boyfriend, about how tall the back wall was, how if you could see both cars when you entered the back gate, which door did she use, and
a lot on security too. Did you encourage
security? So
right.
They may be lining up how close or not close their relationship was. We assume to get back to the pharmacist as another possible love interest, do we think?
Right. Because one of the things that was mentioned earlier, and I believe this was actually last month too, when they were introducing the witness list and, who they wanted to call on, were part of the basis with this pharmacy employee was that he may or may not have, the defense was claiming, viewed Allison's dating profile as part of it. So I can only assume that might be one thing that they want to circle back on. But let's bring in retired Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Mel McDonald. Judge Mel, so great to have you again, sir. And I know you've been listening along with the testimony in court today from the witness, but what's your overall take, Judge?
Yeah, I think it's going as I would expect. One of the things that the prosecutor is seeking to do is, in cases like this, the first person you look to, if you're an investigator, is those closest, which would obviously be the boyfriend, friends, neighbors. Then you go to the next level, known predators that may be in the area, and you gradually expand out. Well, the defense is trying to create reasonable doubt. So what a prosecutor does is lay out through the key witness, the boyfriend, the information to show that they're to exclude him from any consideration. So when the jury considers the DNA and other evidence, that they've got a feel for what the police have done. It's important to note the time and hours they spent with this boyfriend, trying to make sure and to let the jury know, they spent hours, days, repeated interviews to absolutely dot all the I's and cross the T's to make sure that the jury understand that there was no conceivable way he was involved.
Judge, we should bring up that, you know, this man is a victim too. He lost a loved one. He had to find the body. He said it took a giant toll on his relationships, both personally and professionally, to the extent that he had to change his name. So I just wanted to bring that up, that this guy's been through hell along the past 11 years. Judge, could I just get your thoughts? What were they going for, do you think, about this trip to Paris and the alleged missing money and the Chanel purse? I kind of got lost on that a little bit. Do you have any hunches on where they were headed there?
Again, I think what you do if you're the defense attorney is anything. I mean, what we have in this case is part of the criminal act itself, is missing money, missing items. And so what you're going to try to do is to interject into the case anything you can which might offer some kind of an explanation. And I think what they are trying to do, what the prosecutor does, is anticipate where the defendant's attorney is going to go. And then what the defense attorney does is pick out any areas of doubt that might explain away or focus attention away from the client.
Judge Bell, I wanted to ask you too, Brian and I were discussing just I know that you were also a prosecutor for a number of years, but can you talk about just how you thread that tightrope that can happen where you have somebody that, you know, it seems like he certainly has been a victim of this crime as well. He mentioned about the emotional toll that this took on him with his personal relationships, his professional relationships, and even having to change his name. But as a prosecutor coming in to where you still want to poke holes in the case, but the defense attorney having to go in and poke holes in the prosecution's case, but you don't want to come off as, you know, being too aggressive with the witness because potentially they've been a victim of the crime. How is that tightrope with walking that?
Yeah, interesting enough, and one of the things that captured my focus was the defense attorney trying to name this pharmacy employee as the actual perpetrator. What you now have in this case is literally three victims: the deceased Miss Feldman, the boyfriend, and now the pharmacist. And as a former prosecutor and former United States attorney, what jumped into my mind is if I was prosecuting that case, I would make major issues of this. In the closing argument, I would make absolutely certain that this pharmacist is prepared, that there are assurances given that he is not a target, has never been a target. He is a victim. And what you have, if I were prosecuting and making that argument at the end of the case to the jury, would point out that there's, as horrible as Ms. Feldman was as a victim in this case, the pharmacist employee is himself a victim. The boyfriend is a victim. And in my heart of hearts, I think it would have been more effective if the defense attorney had not tried to identify anybody, but just listed as possibilities by pointing the finger at somebody else. He opened the door for the prosecutor to say, this defendant now not only has a murder victim, but they're now going after innocent people.
And Judge, how can they do that? How is that even legal? I mean, if this guy had nothing to do with anything and he's being outed in open court, his name tossed around, I mean, why wouldn't the judge at least not allow this to happen before it did?
Well, there's ways you can move this. A prosecutor can move for what they call a motion in limine to preclude evidence in the case. I would add, though, that this is a death penalty eligible case. And on those kinds of cases, the appeals go on. If he received a death sentence at the end of the case, he's going to be 20 years before it happens. And they will go through endless appeals through the state courts, through the federal courts, trying petitions to the United States Supreme Court. So you've got to make absolutely certain that you don't enter rulings that are going to limit or later prove to be erroneous. So in cases of this magnitude, I think the courts are going to give the defense counsel broad latitude in his questioning. And they're going to allow him, when you make that claim, you better have some pretty good ammunition, because I think this could potentially really, really anger jurors to think it's bad enough for the family of Miss Feldman, her parents and other siblings, and her fiance to go through, but this poor pharmacy employee to be told that he's convicted of murder and to have to live with that kind of claim, allegation that will follow him forever, I think is horrendous. I could foresee him at some point saying, I'm going to sue that guy, the attorney, for the damage he's done to my reputation. Anybody that knows him and follows the case, they're not going to hear his name from your broadcast. But that has scarred him for the rest of his life. Even if this guy is convicted, people are not going to forget that he was named and accused of murdering this wonderful young woman.
Absolutely right. And can I ask you, Judge, along those lines, Trenton and I were pontificating why the defense seemed to be picking apart the relationship between Allison and her boyfriend, fiance. What's you think's behind that? Are they trying to show that maybe they weren't as close as he portrays, and so that maybe there was room for other guys in her life, like a pharmacy employee?
I think that's precisely where they're going. What they're trying to do is to pick any thread that they can possibly pick out that would linger in a juror's mind. And you've got his description of the wonderful, close, loving relationship that the two have shared, that the dining out and the moments and the experiences what they've shared together. What they're obviously, the defense is trying to do is to undermine the strength of that relationship. And again, I think suggest that Ms. Feldman wasn't who the state is suggesting she is, that there was probably room for others in her life, that possibly she was reaching out to this pharmacy employee. And these are threads that they're trying to put into the case that at some point, which will be the closing argument when they lay it out, trying to show that there's reasonable doubt that this victim's boyfriend was not on such solid ground as he was, that Allison may not have been the devoted girlfriend to him, and that this pharmacist, probably jealous of this relationship, decided to take fatal action against her.
Judge, I want to ask you too, we were chatting a little bit last night, but I know yesterday we had a little bit of technical difficulties to get your answer in, but I do want to do that. One of the other attorneys we had join us had mentioned the possibility if the defense calls this pharmacy employee to the stand, and then the potential for them, pleading the fifth on their testimony and not to incriminate. But I know that you had a very emphatic take that the prosecution would not let that happen, just the risk of a hung jury and any potential damage. If you could share about that.
Yeah, I've had the good fortune of being on all three ends. I've been a prosecutor for 4 years, U.S. attorney for 4 years, judge for 7 years, defense attorney for 37 years. So I am well aware and if I was the prosecutor in this case, that pharmacist would testify. And if I was the defense attorney representing the pharmacist, I would make sure before that testimony is handed down the state has already made clear that that pharmacist is not a suspect, never has been a suspect. They believe and have indicted and are pursuing somebody else for this murder. That pharmacist is vital, because if the pharmacist did not testify, especially if he took the stand and invoked the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, and they left it at that, if you're sitting on that jury, you're going to think, wow, why is that guy taking the fifth when his reputation has been destroyed? Why is he doing that? There is no way, if I was a defense attorney, I would make sure that my client had sufficient protection so that if somebody down the road changed their mind, that there are non-prosecution agreements, but there is no way that witness is not going to testify if you're the prosecutor. That's going to happen. And if the defense doesn't call her, I'm going to call her.
Hey, Judge, at the beginning of the day, the defense attorney started off complaining about the courtroom itself, the size of it, the technology. What's your take on all that? He wants to go to a different room that he thinks would be better suited.
Again, I was at another appointment this morning and didn't hear that. What you need to remember in cases, particularly capital cases, it is critical to create a record. Anything you might possibly have down the road is an appeal. And in this case, we have the DNA draw. We have the vial from the DUI case, challenges to the search. What you're trying to do is to put in that record everything that you possibly can that some court someday might point a finger to in an appeal to set aside, especially if there would be a death sentence or some basis. I think what they're trying to do is to create a record. I can't conceive of how the size of the courtroom or the appearance of the courtroom should make a difference. From my days on the bench, I started out with one of the worst courtrooms in the courthouse. I would sit in the chambers, the jury would deliberate in the courtroom, and there was a mighty thin door. And I thought, whoever designed this had to be smoking too much marijuana. But the bottom line is that's not a basis for an appeal, but I can see them, maybe they want a bigger courtroom, maybe a little bit more grandeur in the setting, but they try to create a record in anything they can put that might reach some point someday they can make it.
And Judge, just a little more, if we could touch on the defense was really trying to make the case that we do not want the press involved in this trial whatsoever. And then the complaints that they had with the camera setup, that there might have been some things that were shown on screens that you could see. Although just my watching our pool camera feed that we have in there, just with the focus of where it was at, it's really difficult to see much of anything except for where it's directed. But can you talk about just the judge's perspective of hearing that, and then also making the decision with the public's right to know of a case of this much attention?
Well, the best part would be that my face is in the courtroom, so that would prejudice everybody. Bottom line is what they're trying to do is, again, create a record, anything they can do. Pretrial publicity. One of the great constitutional protections we have in this country is the press. And I think this judge is making extraordinary efforts to accommodate any concerns they have. The delayed feed. During my days on the bench, we don't have the sophistication and the cameras and the setups, but I tried cases during my defense attorney days where you'd have cameras literally in the courtroom. One time I had Dateline 48 Hours in 2020. All those cameras are going, and you don't like it, and you try to perhaps create a record. This is what they're trying to do. There are extraordinary protections for this defendant in this case. The delayed broadcasts, what you can show and not show, protecting witnesses if they don't want to be identified, blurred. as you pointed out, you're not identifying the name of the pharmacist. These are all extraordinary protections. If you're the defense attorney, you're trying to make a record. You're trying to say anything that some appellate court someday may try to hang their finger on in an appeal. So I applaud them for doing it. I think it's wise and prudent. If you're a defense attorney and you're dealing with a capital case, you want to put every objection you possibly can in the record that has some feasibility, some argument, and media coverage and pretrial publicity, all of that during trial publicity are relevant issues. And what they're trying to do is to protect the record.
Judge, if I can, before we let you go, can I put you a little bit on the spot here? I know it's only day 2. Based on what you've heard so far, what is this going to come down to?
I think it's going to come down to the 3 magic letters, DNA. The DNA is crushing evidence. I look back at my days as a prosecutor in the 70s. What a blessing DNA would have been. I had major serial sex offender cases where victims were there. They didn't have DNA back then. In the juror's mind, if you watch these forensic file cases, DNA is the key. They're going to take the bits and pieces, the deposits of the banks, the payoffs, the proximity of the vehicle in the area. These are all pieces that go into the puzzle, but the key line in the puzzle, and that's why they fought so hard to exclude the DNA, is the DNA. And the DNA links this defendant to the scene, and they've already got him making statements that he wasn't there, he wasn't in the area, et cetera, et cetera.
Judge Mel McDonald, if you want to hang with us, we're actually going to go back to court. They're about to resume, and I believe we have the next witness coming in, one of the Scottsdale police officers that responded to the scene. So appreciate your analysis, always poignant. So let's go back to court and listen in if we can.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Please be seated. Let the record reflect we are back in the presence of the jury, and at this time I will turn it over to the state. You may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And good afternoon, sir. We'll have you sworn in by the clerk. If you want to just stand there is fine.
Yeah, Timothy Kerner. Last name is spelled Koerner.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And sir, I'll have you take a seat up here in the witness box, please. Thank you. And you may proceed.
Thank you. Officer, despite my best efforts, I am soft-spoken, so if you don't hear one of my questions, I will repeat it.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Could you please tell the jury your name?
Yeah, my name's Timothy Kerner. Last name is spelled Koerner.
And by whom are you employed, sir?
I'm employed by the city of Scottsdale as a detective with this crisis response team.
All right, sir. And how long have you been a police officer?
I've been a sworn officer now for 23 years.
I have some questions about 2015, but before I get there, Can you tell us a little bit about what you do now?
What I do now is I'm on a specialty unit that deals with mental health crisis, so to speak. We go out and assist people that are dealing with some sort of mental health event, and we try to assist them in getting some sort of treatment.
All right, sir.
Excuse me, could we approach?
You may.
What were your duties?
My duties at that time was a patrol officer in South Scottsdale, the area of this event.
All righty. And how long had you patrolled that area?
On and off, probably for an area of 10 to 12 years at that point in that general area.
I want to ask you some questions about the 18th of February 2015. And in particular, draw your attention to around approximately 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Were you on duty?
I was.
And in a patrol car?
I was fully marked, full uniform.
All right, sir. And did you get did you receive information that led you to a particular residence at 8526 East Monterey Way?
I did.
And can you tell us what information you received which led you to go to that address?
Absolutely. The initial call was just a medical assist event. We often go out on fire or with the fire department for different medical events. Came out, or it sounded like it came out as a routine medical event. And then while I was responding, there was some information that made it seem like it might be a little bit more than just a routine medical event.
All right, sir. I know it's been a long time ago, but do you have a personal recollection of this incident?
I do.
All right. I'm going to ask you some questions about what happened once you arrived there, but are you able to describe for us the residents at that location, just generally the outside?
Yeah, just standard single-family home. It was essentially on like a curved street. Monterey Way ended up curving around where it was not quite east-west, and it would be on what would best be described the north side of the roadway. Had a single drive, single front door.
All right, sir. Now, you mentioned that on occasion you respond with the Scottsdale Fire Department. When you arrived, was there a unit or units from the fire department already there?
Several units. There was at least one fire engine, a battalion chief, and then there was another unit. I can't remember exactly what, but I remember 3 units in total.
All right, sir. And when you arrived, do you recall approximately where you parked your vehicle?
Yeah, approximately from there. The best way of describing it, again, since the roadway kind of curved, the best way of describing it, my vehicle was parked what would be essentially just west of that, maybe 2 houses-ish.
All right, sir. So who did you first contact when you arrived?
As I got out and started approaching the residence, I was actually contacted by a fire department, the battalion chief. I don't remember his name. I don't think I ever got it. And he said something to the effect of, this is definitely going to be your scene. And that kind of clued me in that this was going to be potentially something more than just an average call.
All right, sir. Now, you recall approximately how long you remained at the scene?
In total, I want to say probably an hour or so. I can't remember exact time when I got there just after 4, and I want to say I left just after 5-ish. I don't have my official report in front of me.
All right, sir. And if you need it at any time, I have a copy that I can show you. Might refresh your recollection. I just wanted a general idea.
Yeah.
Is all. So maybe an hour.
Yeah, approximately.
During that hour, did you ever enter the residence?
I did not.
Once you had a conversation with this battalion chief, were you tasked with anything to do from a member of your department?
I was. As I approached the resident itself, I was contacted by Scottsdale Police Sergeant Williamson, my boss, and I was instructed to remain outside and to contact the reporting party for the event.
All righty. And did you do that?
I did.
This reporting party, were they male or female?
Male. First name is Alex, and last name I can't really pronounce. It was like European.
All righty. And where was he when you first had made contact with him?
He was seated in some landscaping right near the driveway, near a BMW, I believe it was, that I think ended up being his vehicle.
All righty. I have just a few photographs to show you. First of all, that are in evidence, 183. And are you able to see that photograph?
Yes.
Do you recognize that person?
I do.
Is that the Alex that you had contact with?
Correct. That was the reporting party for our event.
All righty. Now, did you make an effort to talk to him?
I did.
What do you remember about his ability to communicate with you?
Communication was difficult. He was initially crying. He had tears, or what appeared to be crying. He had tears going down his face. He appeared to be shaking. As I spoke with him, he had normal voice at first, but as I had conversation with him, he appeared to kind of become more worked up, and he began almost what I could only describe as wailing. Sobbing very profusely to the point where I couldn't understand him any longer.
Now, at some point, did you later learn that at least at that moment in time, it was a potential homicide scene?
I did.
So, in your training as a police officer and your experience as a police officer, when you were speaking with Alex, besides asking questions, trying to get answers, were you paying attention to his physical condition in any way?
I was. Like any other case, when we get there, until we rule somebody out, they're at least a potential suspect. So I was paying attention to different attributes. Once I became aware that it was a potential homicide, I started looking for any kind of injuries on Alex, anything else that might somehow tie him to the event.
And did you observe anything?
I did not. I didn't notice anything while he was sitting in a seated position. At one point, we ended up moving him. As he got up, I could see more of his body. I didn't see anything there. And later on, I got to see a lot more of his body, and I saw no injuries on him that would be consistent with any kind of struggle related to a potential homicide.
You mentioned that he was sitting in some landscaping when you first arrived.
Yes.
Correct? It sounded like you asked him to get up.
I did. If I recall right, I was instructed that they were going to try and cordon off the house as a crime scene so that they would put up tape and basically move anybody that did not have to be within that scene outside the scene. So I was instructed to move Alex away from the house. I asked him if he would be willing to go with me to my vehicle. He agreed, and we stood him up. He needed a little bit of help getting up, but we walked him to my car when he agreed to go.
All righty. And during the time you were with him there at the residence, did you ask questions?
I did.
You described for us your initial observations of his emotional state that you observed, correct?
Correct.
Did that stop? Did it continue?
His emotional state would go kind of back and forth. As he was speaking, sometimes he'd be okay to be able to understand what he was speaking. There was other times when he became very emotional and went back to that kind of very wailing, very hard sobbing, to the point where I couldn't understand what he was speaking. He was clearly trying to say something, but I couldn't understand it until he was able to calm himself enough to speak again.
At some point while you were with him, were photographs taken of Alex?
He was photographed at the scene in my car, and then I believe he was photographed again at the station where we eventually moved him.
So when I showed you 183, let me put it back on the screen again. Do you think this is your patrol vehicle?
Yeah, that should be my patrol vehicle.
All right, sir. Putting 184 on the screen. Again, is this just a close-up of Alex?
Correct.
Who was taking maybe not their name, but who was taking the photographs?
That would be one of our crime scene specialists that specializes in photographs and other forensics, etc.
Showing you 185. What are we looking at here?
That would be Alex's hands. I believe the reason for that type of a shot would be to show if there was any kind of injuries or any marks on him that would be consistent with a struggle.
186, sort of a duplicate, I guess, correct?
Correct. That looks like it concentrates on what would be his right hand more than the other.
.188.
That would be the palm, the inside palm of his hand.
All right. And lastly, 188.
And I believe that would be the palm of the other hand.
All right, sir.
For Alex.
I have some questions of you about the communication that you had with Alex at the scene. But before I do that, you mentioned that later you took him to Scottsdale Police Department.
I did.
What did you do when you arrived at Scottsdale PD?
When we arrived at Scottsdale PD, he was put into a conference room. He was not handcuffed or anything else. He was just there for questioning. He went voluntarily with me. I instructed him that we'd like to move him away from the scene itself, and he went voluntarily. I walked him into the station, set him down in the conference room, and then we were there to await the arrival of an investigating detective for the case.
Were you present when Alex was requested to provide his clothing?
I was.
And did he do so?
Absolutely. Completely voluntarily. We asked him if he'd be willing to turn over his clothes just so that we could have that for evidence, and he began taking his clothes off right there before we even had any other garments for him to do it. Said something about do what you need to do.
Now, let me take you back to the residence. You mentioned earlier that you recall having to perhaps help Alex up from the landscape to walk him away from the scene, correct?
Correct.
At any point when he was with you in or around your patrol vehicle, did he make an effort to get into the house?
There was a time once I got him to my patrol vehicle. He had asked about Allison and that he wanted to go see her. His request kind of got a little bit more, I wouldn't say forceful, but a little bit more direct. And at one time he stepped out of the back of my patrol car, and I was concerned that he might go into the scene and kind of contaminate potential evidence. So I stepped between him and the residents, and he seemed to calm down and get back into the car again.
Did you ask him questions about his relationship with his girlfriend?
I did.
And what I need to know is if, while you were asking these questions, did he describe his demeanor, his emotional state while you're asking these questions?
His demeanor during the questioning, especially in relation to his girlfriend, usually was calm when I could understand what he was speaking about, what he was actually saying. But as he would have conversations about her, his emotional state would become much more ramped up. He would become sobbing again. He'd start crying. Tears would go rolling down his face, and he'd get to the point where I couldn't understand him any longer. It would take him a bit of time to be able to control his breathing and calm down enough before I could understand what he was saying again. Then he'd speak about her again, and then seem to go back and forth between those states of emotion.
I'm not at this point asking you what he said, but did he provide you some background information about his relationship with Allison?
He did.
Did you ask him about who had keys to the residence?
I did.
And what did he tell you?
He told me that Allison was the sole owner, that only he himself had keys, and then Allison's family had keys to the residence. And as far as he knew, that was the only people that had any kind of keys to the residence.
At this point in time, did you know that, or had you been told that Alex was the one who called 911?
Yes.
Did he have his phone with him?
I do not recall. I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Do you have a recollection of perhaps him showing you or you looking at some text messages?
Yes. Now that you pointed that out, he did have his phone. At one point, I did see kind of a text trail from between him and Allison.
Okay. Why was that important to you, or might be important to you?
I had asked, trying to figure out when he last spoke with Allison, when he last saw her, when he had any kind of communications with her. And part of that was he showed me a last text that he received from her.
All right. Do you recall the time of that last text?
If I recall right, it was the evening before we discovered, before he called, and it was somewhere around 8 p.m.
Did he tell you whether or not he had been attempting to contact her either by phone call or text?
He did. He had indicated that he routinely speaks with her The Wednesday, the 18th, he had tried to send her texts during the day, have conversations with her, and there was no answer from her. So he was attempting contact.
Did he tell you anything about how it was he gained access to the house before calling 911?
Yes. He had indicated that he had knocked on the door or otherwise tried to contact her through the door. There was no answer, so he used a key to enter the residence.
Now, I know you've told us earlier that you did not enter the residence, correct?
Correct.
How close did you get to the front door? Do you remember?
I would say roughly 15, 20 feet probably is the closest I got.
While talking with Alex, did he describe to you an odor that he smelled once he went into the residence?
He did. He said as soon as he opened the door, he smelled as he put it, a very strong odor of bleach. And I remember him saying that didn't really initially kind of concern him because Allison was a very clean person.
While you were there, did you ever happen to notice the smell?
I did not that I recall.
Let me take you to the 19th of February, the next day.
Okay.
Were you asked to do anything in relationship to this investigation?
I was. I initially responded as, for lack of a better way of putting it, traffic control, scene control. I relieved an officer that was on a perimeter position. I stayed there for, I believe it was a couple of hours before I was relieved. And then I was away for about an hour before I responded back for area canvass with several other officers to try and contact neighbors or people that might have seen anything.
So in terms of scene security, what did that encompass?
The position that I had for scene security was just in my vehicle across the roadway, making sure no vehicle traffic went through, also to confront anybody that potentially could have walked in. But for the most part, if I recall, I didn't have anybody to try to do either.
And when you say that you, an hour later or so, after you were relieved from scene security, you canvassed the neighborhood, what did you do?
I linked up with another officer and we went door to door. We were assigned a kind of a grid area, for lack of a better way of putting it, to knock on the doors of all those residents. It was early evening. I think the hope was that we could contact more people home after they got back from work.
Did you, in doing so, receive any information that you at least felt might be important to the investigation?
No, myself and that officer did not receive anything from those residents that we contacted that would be of even potential value that we felt.
Just a couple more questions.
Sure.
During your conversation there with Alex, did you have a discussion with him about an alarm system?
I did.
In the home. Tell us about that.
That was in the same conversation as far as who had keys to the residence. I had asked him about the alarm system. He said that same situation, only Allison, her family, and himself had the actual alarm code.
Thank you, Detective. That's all the questions I have. Counsel may have some for you.
Sure.
And cross-examination by the defense.
Do you recall talking to the defense and the county attorneys back in 2021?
Vaguely, yes.
That's right. Good question. Going to involve everybody in my questioning for you. We talked about your experience and what your job at that time was.
Correct.
And I want to thank you for the work you're doing. I think at that point you had just begun the mental health response team, I think, and I think you said at that point that was really the best job you had had.
Correct.
Do you still feel the same way?
I do.
Did what happened in this incident in any way lead you to that kind of work?
No, I've had that type of an inclination since very early in my career when I saw a need for multiple people that I was dealing with on pretty much every call I was going out on.
Okay. I don't really need to ask you many questions. The state asked you most of the questions I had. I want to talk about two different areas. One thing you talked about was that Officer Williamson came up to you while you were at the scene.
Correct.
Okay, and what is his role as far as the Scottsdale Police Department?
Currently or back then?
Back then.
Back then. He was patrol sergeant. I believe he was my boss at that time. He ended up, there was some switching, but at that time, I believe he was my actual boss.
Okay, and so that I think you mentioned that he was your boss and that he told you to stick with Alex.
Correct.
Okay. What was he wearing?
He should have been, and as I recall, he would be in full uniform. Just having sergeant stripes would be the difference in uniforms.
Okay. And you were in full uniform?
Correct.
And the fire department personnel that you talked about, did you happen to notice if any of those personnel went into the house?
I personally did not.
Okay. And how were they dressed?
The battalion chief that walked up to me would be his normal attire. It would be blue shirt, if I recall right, and BDU pants type thing.
How about the other fire officers that were there?
I don't recall seeing any other fire officers there. I know they were there, but I don't recall seeing anybody.
When I guess I may have misstated that. Fire personnel.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I don't recall seeing any others. I know no others approached me. There was a time where we had Alex kind of eval'd. He was having some difficulties kind of breathing, and one of his sobbing outbursts, I guess, would be the best concern, and we had him checked out to make sure that he was medically okay.
And was he?
He was.
Okay. So while you were there with him, Williamson came, and then Officer Williamson or Sergeant Williamson, did he go in the house, do you know?
I believe so. I believe he and another officer went inside to clear the residence to make sure that there was no safety concerns and to do their at least initial clearing of the residence.
Was the front door of the residence open, if you recall?
I do not, one way or another.
Okay. Do you know how they got into the residence? Did they go in the front door?
I would believe they went through the front door, but at that point I was more focused on Alex. I wasn't really paying attention on what they were doing.
Okay. Do you recall if someone, Sergeant or Detective Lockerbie came by?
I don't remember Lockerbie. I remember Lou Guy, Detective Lou Guy.
Okay. And who is he?
He is a detective. I believe he was with our violent crimes unit, and he was one of the investigating detectives in this incident, if I recall right.
Okay. And so you talked about the patrol group of people, at least you and Williamson, and then you also had the violent crimes group?
Correct. That would be the main investigative component of this case.
And you recall, did you say Lugi or
Lugai?
Lugai, okay. Who else from that unit was there?
Wouldn't be able to answer that question. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. Let's see. And I think you talked about someone from coming up and taking photographs?
Correct.
Okay, and what group of people would that be from?
That would be from our, what we call CSS, Crime Scene Specialist Unit.
Okay. So while you're at the scene, several people came up. You were observing to see if you saw any injuries on Alex that would be consistent with what you understood had happened in the house.
Correct.
And then someone came up and took photographs.
Correct.
Okay. And then you took him to the scene. I took him to the police department.
Yes.
He was at the
yes.
scene. Okay.
Absolutely.
And then at the police department, you or someone asked for his clothing.
Correct.
And then, do you recall if you saw any medical person at the police department?
At the station itself, no, there was no medical personnel there.
Do you recall a nurse looking him over?
I do not recall that.
Okay. Okay. And he was given a jump seat at that point?
He was
Alex,
given what?
Once Alex gave you his clothing, he was given a jumpsuit?
Correct.
Okay. And then someone came and took him home?
That I wouldn't know. I was relieved before he left that station.
Okay. And you talked about Alex showing you text messages?
He did.
At the scene?
Correct.
Did you take his phone?
I did not.
Okay. Okay. That's one of the areas that I want to talk about. I want to talk to you about another area, which is something that Vince didn't talk to you about.
Sure.
When you were talking to us back in 2021, you were kind of talking about your experience working in that neighborhood. At that point, I have 20 years, but I think you said today it was 10 or 12 as of 2015 at least.
Yeah, roughly.
Okay, so that would be 6 years more, so we're close to 20. Okay. We talked about the alleyways that were in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And some of us have lived in neighborhoods that have alleyways, or people haven't. That's an older neighborhood, right?
Correct.
Okay, and it's a neighborhood that at that point was in transition.
Transition how?
People buying homes, fixing them up for resale.
Yeah, that's pretty much all at all times. But yeah, there's definitely homes that were for sale in that area.
And older people that had lived in those homes, maybe that were at a different financial level, that were selling them to more prominent people that were moving into Scottsdale.
I would assume so. I don't know so, but I would assume so.
Okay. So when we talk about alleys, can you talk about what you mean by that?
It's an alleyway, guessing for dimensions, maybe 15 feet across. It's designed for a automated garbage truck to go through. At that time, I believe they had large black trash cans that were every maybe 3 houses or so that people could put their trash into, and the trash trucks would go by and collect them.
Okay. Did you ever have a time that you can recall being in the alleyway behind Allison's house?
I believe that I walked through the alleyway when we were going to do the area canvas, just so I could get an idea of, and not past Allison's. I think I walked into it just at the beginning of it, so I had an idea of what I could see, because I wasn't familiar with that alleyway itself.
So you're talking about an alleyway. Is that like a secondary street system that goes throughout the neighborhood for like service vehicles and dump trucks?
It's not designed as a normal throughway, but utility vehicles, etc., city vehicles would use that for whatever tasks they have to complete.
Okay. And in your experience working in that area, is that an area that crimes would take place in?
Sometimes. You have, For example, sometimes you'd have transients that might be in the back, they're using drugs, etc. I've definitely caught that type of an element in alleyways. Not necessarily right at Allison's, but in that general area.
And do people sometimes ride bikes through those routes?
Absolutely.
Okay. And can you go from block to block in the alleyway?
Depends on the alleyway. I don't know where hers filed out specifically, but it has to have basically a starting and an end point. So I would assume it goes out at some point somewhere else.
Okay. So you would have like, say a block and there would be a matrix of alleyways behind the houses in that block?
Correct.
And then you might have another block that has the same system?
Correct.
And then you could go from block to block, but you'd have to cross some kind of street.
In theory, yes.
In theory, right.
Yes.
And those alleyways kind of meander at different turns and twists.
Yeah, every residence would have an alleyway, or at least for the most part, every residence there would have an alleyway of some sort.
And people in that area would kind of have a sense of what routes to take to get where within the alleyway.
If they're familiar with the area, that I would say yes. I don't know how familiar they would be with that area.
Right. Assuming that someone has lived there a few years.
I think that's a fair assumption.
Okay, and they may take that alleyway to get, say, from their backyard to someone else in the neighborhood's backyard.
Potentially.
Do people sometimes walk their dogs in the alleyways?
I don't know that I've ever seen that. I can't say that they wouldn't, but I don't think I've ever seen that.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Do sometimes, if you're say you have someone that you're looking for that's committed a crime, does sometimes they hide in the alleyways?
Sure.
Okay. And do like someone who's burglarizing in a home, would they use the alleyway to get to the backyard of a home?
Potentially.
Okay. In Allison's, as far as Allison's alleyway, there were officers that were assigned to guard the alleyway after this occurred. Is that right?
I don't know. I would assume so, but I don't know so.
This is maybe you've already answered that because this question, but you've told me you didn't actually go behind Allison's house.
Correct.
In some of the houses that you walked behind, could you look over the fence into the backyard from the alleyway?
Again, not Allison's neighborhood, but in other neighborhoods, I've seen where you could see into different backyards.
Okay, so in those circumstances where you could see, what was the height of the fence approximately?
Each residence is different. I've seen them where they're probably 8 feet, and I've seen others that are 5 feet. So it just varies on the different residents and how they constructed their fence.
Okay. Getting close here. Let's see. Did you have any discussions with the fire personnel at the scene as to why they? Let me back up a little bit. It sounded like the fire personnel were at the scene when you got there.
Correct.
Right, and I think when we talked before, you got there pretty quickly.
Yeah, I believe if I recall the time frames right, I want to say that I got there within like 3 minutes of them pronouncing Allison.
Okay, so did you hear when you say pronouncing, did you hear that over the radio?
I don't specifically recall. I want to say that I just heard that or saw it on our computers. It would have a time stamp for when it was officially occurring.
Did any of the fire personnel talk to you about what they had been doing before they arrived at Allison's house?
No.
Okay. Just looking at my questions here.
Sure.
I had some questions on the census. So did you say that you went to about 30 homes on the 19th?
30-ish, yeah,
Okay.
if I recall right and if my supplement was right.
Okay. So how did that work?
Simply went door to door. We walked up the driveway, found the front door, knocked on the door. Somebody answered, great. If not, we went on to the next one.
So if someone answered, what happened next?
Then we just asked him. We started out with generalized questions, and we never went into specifics, but we just asked him if they were in the area or at home, in the time frame of when we believe the incident to have occurred originally.
Okay. And you can't recall anything specific that you were told that alerted you to that maybe this was good information that could be used in that investigation?
Yeah, I think if I remember anything comments-wise from the residents that we contacted that would be related to it, they'd be curious about the presence of police in the area,
Right.
or maybe they heard something on the news or something like that. It was very generalized if there was any comments about the incident at all.
So if we can just talk a minute about, things that you might have, would have been of interest to you. Would it have been an interest to you if someone heard something about the time that the death occurred?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Would it be? Are you looking for people that might have witnesses something?
Sure, and that was one of the questions. Is we asked them if they saw anything suspicious, if they were in that area, maybe driving by, etc. If they had any information that would be kind of odd, out of place for that area, and we got nothing from that.
And were you also, was it on your mind that perhaps you might find a suspect in that process?
Potentially, sure.
So it wasn't ruled out that someone in the neighborhood might have been involved?
I was not told that the neighborhood was clear per se, nor was I told that there was a potential suspect in the area. It was just going to try and gain information.
Okay. Did the presence of the alleyways make any difference in your analysis of reasons to talk to neighbors?
No, we contacted all the houses regardless of where the alleyways were or were not.
Did you take any notes from those conversations?
No, I would have taken notes if there were anything of significance that any of the residents would have said. I would have identified them, got contact information, and then put down what they would have said.
So you didn't collect any DNA at that point from
Correct.
anyone there? Okay. And you were just doing a cursory, as fast as possible, visit to see if you were alerted to something?
We would take as much time as we had if there was any information that came out.
Okay.
It wasn't as fast as possible, but yes, we were going from house to house depending on what we got.
Okay. So would you say that it was all hands on deck at that point, at least as of the 19th?
It was, if it wasn't all hands, it was pretty close to it. There was a significant number of assets contributed to that.
Can you talk about those?
I don't have the totals. I know that we had quite a few patrol units. I don't know the numbers or otherwise. And patrol is usually out taking calls for service. So for us to do that, it was significant.
Was there a command vehicle there?
I do not recall seeing one.
Okay. And you know what I mean by,
Correct.
I may be using the wrong word. What is a command vehicle?
Command vehicle, for lack of a better way of putting it, is an RV that's ours is painted very similar to what you'd see a marked patrol vehicle. And then inside they have extra equipment, assets, places that detectives can go to kind of gather information, and command staff can kind of figure out what they're going to do for their next area of responsibility.
Okay. While you're at the scene on February 18th, and I understand you weren't there long because you transported Alex, did you see anyone put on protective clothing when they entered the house?
No, I don't recall seeing anybody enter the house one way or another.
Okay. Just a moment.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And any redirect by the state?
Give me just a moment.
Sure.
Excuse me. One question.
Sure.
Maybe two. You stated that you don't recall what Sergeant Williamson was wearing. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you assume he was in uniform.
He should have been. There's no way that he would not have been. That would have been the standard uniform like me, navy blue, top and bottom, and the only difference would have been is that he would have had sergeant stripes on his sleeve.
And in your years as a patrol officer, had you been asked to respond to scenes where you needed to clear a residence?
Absolutely.
And when I use that term clear, what does that mean?
Clear is usually meant just that you go inside and you want to make sure that there's no victims in immediate need of care, and that's all throughout the residence. It's also looking for suspects that may or may not still be inside the residence.
And before you enter to clear the residence, do you take the time to put on protective clothing?
In a scene like this, if it was available, if time would allow, sure, I would do that. If time would not be allowed, if there was some sort of exigent circumstance where I needed to clear the residence a little bit quicker, I probably would not have.
Okay. When you're clearing a residence, what's your primary concern?
Primary concern is any victims that are in need of immediate care, trying to get them out of the residence. It's also looking for suspects that may be inside to make sure that the scene is safe for not just any potential victims, but also for ourselves as well.
All right. That's all I have.
Okay. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if anyone has a question for this witness, we would collect it at this time. And seeing none, may this witness be excused, subject to recall.
Yes.
You may step down, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And would you like to approach?
Sure.
Okay. Good afternoon, sir. And we'll have you come forward. And if you would come up here in front of my clerk, she will swear you in.
Sure. Scott Williamson. W-I-L-L-I-A.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, nothing but the truth.
And I'll have you take a seat up here in the witness box. Thank you. And you may proceed.
Thank you. Your Honor, before I do, Exhibits 251 and 252, which are diagrams that were prepared in the beginning of this investigation of the residence. I've asked counsel, I'm going to move the introduction, but what I want to make clear for the record is there is a legend on here that, well, I would avow that we will connect up later. This officer would not necessarily be able to identify the items in the legend, but it would assist, I think, in describing for the jury what it is he did when he entered the residence.
Any objection? No. And I'm sorry, tell me the exhibit number again.
It's 251, 252.
Okay. It's ordered by stipulation of the parties, admitting 251 and 252 into evidence.
Could you tell us your name, please?
Sure, Scott Williamson.
And by whom are you employed, sir?
With the city of Scottsdale, the Scottsdale Police Department.
And how long have you been a police officer in the city of Scottsdale?
Almost 24 years.
And what is your current assignment?
I am the sergeant for the crisis response team.
I want to take you back to what do your duties entail at this time?
At this time, we deal with a lot of behavioral mental health calls for service within the city that include involuntary committals, transporting to mental health facilities.
All right, sir. I want to take you back to 2015 in February,
okay.
Specifically the 18th of February, 2015. What were your duties then?
I was a patrol sergeant on what we call C shift, which is typically 11 in the morning till 9 at night.
All right. And what area of the city were you in charge of?
Pretty much from McKellips to McDonald. I had the South District. We call it District 1.
And on this particular date, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, was there a squad of officers assigned to you?
Yes, there were.
How many were on that squad?
On that day, I don't know. Typically, a squad consists of between probably 5 and 7 officers.
All righty. So around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, approximately.
Yeah.
Were you in a patrol unit?
I was, but I was at having coffee.
All righty. And did you receive a call for service?
I did.
And what do you recall about that?
Didn't receive the call for service. The call for service was aired. They were asking for units to respond to what initially came out as a medical at the residence on Monterey.
All righty. And would that be 8526 East Monterey Way?
Correct.
So I don't know that it's that important. So how did you receive that information?
Typically what happens is dispatch would air the call. So over my portable radio, I heard that there was a call for service at that residence that male had stated that someone was not breathing, and fire was also en route to that scene.
All righty. How long did it take you to arrive?
Within a matter of 5 minutes.
Now, on the way, did you receive any additional information?
Not that I recall.
Okay. At some point, did you become aware that the young lady whose house this was dead?
Yes.
And how did you receive that information?
Over the radio.
So you knew that when you got there, correct? When you arrived, if I understood you correctly, well, let me ask you, was fire already there?
Correct. There were several firefighters outside the front door.
And what about patrol officers? Do you remember if any other officers were there, or were you the first?
I believe I was the first and arrived probably about the same time as Officer Kerner.
Okay. And so when you arrived, what did you do?
Noticed that on the front lawn there were some firefighters with a white male that seemed distraught. As I walked up to the door, I could immediately smell an odor of bleach or chlorine.
And by the door, you mean the front door to the house?
Front door of the residence, correct.
Was the front door open?
Yes, it was.
Did you have any communication with the individual that fire was working with?
I did not. I had Officer Kerner stay with him to get his statement and be with the firefighters as well.
All right. And did you speak with the firefighters before you went into the house?
I did. A few of them, one of them had told me that 4 of them had gone in. They had placed leads on the victim and confirmed that she was deceased.
Okay. So once you learned that information, did you, was it up to you to decide what to do from that point on? with the residents, I mean.
Yes.
Okay. So what did you decide to do?
My primary role as a patrol sergeant would have been to secure the residence to make sure there were no other victims or suspects inside the house.
Okay. And how did you go about doing that?
Initially, another officer had showed up at that point, Officer Powell. He met me at the front door. We stepped within the front door, and then we methodically moved from the south side of I moved to the south side of the residence, clearing the kitchen and family room and the door to the south.
Let me take you back to your years, as an officer, training experience.
Sure.
When you go into a residence like this to clear for potential victims or suspects, are you cognizant of potentially interfering or contaminating or somehow compromising physical evidence that's in the residence?
Yes, with a situation like this, it was obvious that this was a crime scene, and that limiting the number of bodies that were in that house and to disturb anything that was in there was the priority.
Okay. How are you dressed?
In a patrol uniform.
Similar to what you have on today?
Correct.
And when had you come on duty?
That day would have been about 11 in the morning.
All righty. And the day before, do you recall what your shift would have been?
I'd have to know what day the event happened on. Typically, that shift is Tuesday through Friday.
So February the 18th is the day you responded.
Right.
I actually, unfortunately, don't recall the day of the week that was. Let's assume it was a Wednesday. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm not under oath, but let's just assume that it was a Wednesday. So the Tuesday before, would you have been on duty?
I would have.
And what time would your shift have ended?
9 o'clock at night, 9 p.m.
All righty. When you go home, do you take a shower, take a bath?
Yeah, typically.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about your uniform?
Our uniforms are typically dry cleaned.
Okay. Do you know the defendant in this case?
I do not.
You ever had any contact with him to your knowledge?
No, sir.
All right. So you you make a plan to go in. You said it was obvious, at least I think this was your words, it appeared to be a homicide scene once you entered the door, correct?
Correct.
And describe for us why you came to that conclusion.
I didn't use the word homicide, but it was a crime. It was a crime scene.
Crime scene.
Correct.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Walking in there, it was obvious with the smears that were on the ground and the blood. There were some what appeared to be a substance that looked like blood and cleaning supplies smeared onto the ground, and the overwhelming smell of the bleach that was in there.
When you entered the door, where did you go within the residence?
Initially, when we walked in the door, we could see the victim to the left of us, which was to the north of the house in the hallway. My immediate focus was to the south of the home. The kitchen was wide open, so it was easier to clear any threats that were there visually, so I didn't have to go too far into the kitchen dining room area.
How close to the young lady's body did you get?
Probably within 3 feet.
All righty. What did you observe about her?
That she was fully undressed, except for a piece of cloth over her face, lying naked in the hallway, with her head pointing southeast.
And I thank you. I neglected to ask you this. This residence, did the front door basically face the south, to the south?
To the west.
Okay. Let me put exhibit 251, oops, on the screen. Are you able to see that?
I am, sir.
So let me, you see here where it says living room?
Yes, sir.
And let's assume this is a doorway.
Yes, sir.
Would that be where you entered?
Correct.
All right. On this particular diagram, would you agree with me that north is to the top?
Correct.
All righty. So you entered the door. You recall anything about what you observed about the living room area?
I believe I noticed some droplets of blood that were in that area.
Okay. And then you saw the victim's body in the hallway.
Correct.
And at that point, are you by yourself?
At that point, I believe Officer Powell was with me.
Okay. Where's your gun?
Out of my holster and at the low ready, which means...
And why was that?
At this point, the house hasn't been cleared for any other threats or victims.
So what if anything, did Officer Powell do?
At that point, he covered the north side, north of the victim's body, while I walked across to the door that was to the south, checking the kitchen.
Okay. So let me scoot this up a little bit here. You see where it says kitchen?
Yes, sir.
And there is a doorway here, it appears.
Yes, sir.
Did you go to that door?
I did.
And what do you remember? Was it open, closed, locked, unlocked?
It was locked. There were 2 locks on it. Both of them were locked. I unlocked them, looked out the door.
All righty. Did you go into the garage, do you recall?
Not at that point.
All righty. Now, was Officer Powell, did he stay at the door, to your knowledge?
He did. His focus was the north hallway to make sure that nothing came in behind me while I was searching the south.
We've had some testimony that there was an Arcadia door in this kitchen dining room area that led into the backyard. Did you go out of that door at all?
I did not.
So once that you encountered the locked door, you unlocked it, correct?
I did.
There were 2 locks.
Correct.
What did you do next?
I had trouble relocking them. Typically, I would leave it the way that I had found it. But I had trouble locking it. I don't recall why. But I left it unlocked and then went back to meet with Officer Powell.
And was he still near the doorway?
Correct.
What do the 2 of you do then?
At that point, I believe Officer Van Wielde had arrived on scene, and the 3 of us started to move north through the home.
Okay. So north through the hallway where Allison's body was found, correct?
Yes, sir.
And describe how the 3 of you, first of all, what efforts did you make to avoid any of the physical evidence that you observed?
If you could rephrase, please.
As the 3 of you are proceeding through the hallway, are you being cognizant of anything?
Yes.
What?
The fact that there was evidence everywhere and that we didn't want to disturb it.
Okay. And so describe how you went about clearing the rest of the residence.
We stayed predominantly to the west on the left side of the hallway and then cleared the bedrooms clockwise.
Did you enter yourself a particular bedroom?
I don't recall whether I entered the guest bedrooms or the office. I am for sure certain that I entered the master bedroom.
All righty. Which is up here on the upper right-hand corner, correct? Your Honor, we have a stipulation to the introduction of Exhibit 249.
And that's correct. No objection?
Objection.
It's ordered admitting Exhibit 249 into evidence.
You mentioned you went into you specifically recall going into the master bedroom. Did you also go into the master bathroom?
I did.
And did you discover there was a doorway in that bathroom?
I did.
And where did it lead?
To the backyard.
Did you open that door?
I did. I unlocked it and opened it.
So it was locked when you arrived, correct? Did you enter into the backyard?
I did.
What did you do, if anything, in the backyard?
We visually cleared the backyard to make sure that there were no other victims or suspects in the backyard by moving through the backyard to the south.
And did you venture into the alleyway yourself?
I did not.
Are both the other officers with you in the backyard?
They are.
Did you observe where they went?
Up the back alleyway.
Okay. Where did you go?
I returned to the master bathroom to close the door and secure it the way that I had found it and to exit through the front door.
While you were in the backyard, did you happen to look into the swimming pool?
I did.
Did you see anything that caught your attention?
Yeah, there seemed to be a small mat of some sort or a piece of carpet that was in the north side of the pool.
Showing you Exhibit 249. Do you see the doorway that you entered into the backyard?
I do.
Is that this door here where I'm pointing?
Correct, with the bag on it.
All right. And again, you had to unlock it when you went out.
Correct.
And then you locked it again when you came back in.
Correct.
Showing you Exhibit 50, which is already in evidence. Do you have a recollection of what we are looking at here?
The carport.
Is this off of the back porch?
It is.
Do you see the gate there?
I do.
Do you recall whether or not you entered the area where the car seems to be located?
Yes.
And what did you do while you were in there?
Walked a 360 around the vehicle and then came back out just to look inside the vehicle to see if there was anything or anyone inside.
And did you enter the car itself?
No.
You see this door here?
I do.
Do you recognize that doorway?
I do. That's the one that leads from the laundry room into the kitchen in the main house.
After you came back into the residence, did you go back out the front door?
I did.
And what did you do next?
At that point, I had officers start setting up crime scene tape, the red tape for the inner perimeter, and then yellow tape to block off the streets.
Okay, what about the alleyway?
I don't specifically remember doing it or ordering someone to do it, but it would have been.
I think I asked you this already, but just in case I didn't. When you entered the garage, you said you looked into the car, correct? You didn't enter it. Is that right?
Correct.
You didn't touch it.
No, sir.
While you were in the home, inside the residence, other than the doors that you unlocked, and then tried to either closed up again and relock the locks, did you touch anything?
No, sir.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Would you like to approach?
Hey, folks, thanks for sticking with us. Sorry about the little technical delay there at the end, but wrapping up day 2 of the Ian Mitcham trial that just happened and the murder of Allison Feldman.
Talked about the police showing up to the scene. We heard from at least 2 officers today, responding officers. The one mentioned that both of them saw blood everywhere, the smell of chlorine, and quite the horrific scene. What else did
No
they say?
forced entry.
No forced
I think
entry.
that was the big part because, we had the boyfriend under the prosecution finishing his testimony and then the cross-examination too, and both had hit on the security factor on this of was she known to lock her doors, and also did she have her windows open at any time? And he testified in both parts that when he entered the residence, he unlocked the door, which the police officers also mentioned. So again, someone got in that home, locked it up after they were done with the crime.
And he did mention, one of the boyfriend, that she had the security system, but sometimes turned it on while she was there, sometimes did not, sometimes locked the door when she was there, sometimes did not. That gives someone easy access. Another responding officer, it was his duty to deal with the boyfriend. At that point, they didn't know who might be their prime suspect. A boyfriend often is. He talked about how upset the boyfriend was so badly that he couldn't understand what he was saying a lot of the time. He said that but at the same time, showed no signs of any injuries. They showed pictures in courts of his hand, top and bottom, no signs of any injuries there, and that he willingly went into police headquarters to answer questions, gave up his clothing. But before that, it was a touching moment. He asked if he could go in one more time to see Allison before he left. They did not let him because they didn't want to disrupt the crime scene anymore. But it was just a touching scene to realize that there are more than just one victim here.
Yeah, for sure. And you heard his testimony to the boyfriend when he was talking about during the last part of it that really the effect that losing her murder, and then the aftermath of it, where it affected his personal relationships, his professional relationships, so much so that he had to change his last name just to get a little bit of distance, because he was saying that even on social media, so many were out there being vicious, trying to connect him to the crime, being responsible for her murder. Just heartbreaking.
Also mentioned that he has no knowledge of this mysterious pharmacist at a Walgreens. So they're trying to, the defense is clearly trying to head in that direction to this mystery man that we'll eventually learn more about him as
we'll see if he makes an appearance.
He may or may not make an appearance, but he's been thrown under the bus by the defense, outed his name several times, a pharmacist at a Walgreens in the area. So, but the boyfriend said he has no knowledge of who this guy is.
And just like we heard with the prosecution, you know, there's no DNA evidence of this person linking them to the crime. Hence why they have not been charged with the crime.
But there is DNA evidence of Ian Mitcham at the crime scene. His vehicle was spotted in the area, and he made a couple of deposits at a bank ATM in the area that night. So,
which the defense on the DNA part, I mean, in their opening statement too, was interesting to hear. I think the quote was, "The scene is what the scene is." You know, wow. Right. They're not disputing that. So a lot of twists and turns, and man, past 2 days, it's been very interesting.
It's been nuts. Okay, so no trials on Fridays as we move ahead. So nothing tomorrow. We'll be back covering it on Monday. This could go through January. And at first I thought, no way. But now you hear that the defense is trying to pick apart everything, including the size of the courtroom. It's not big enough.
No, clearly not.
You can
not
see,
happy.
You can see how this could go through January.
And the press, too.
And the press. They want the press out of there. And the death penalty is on the line. So there's a lot going on here.
Definitely. So tune in next week. We'll be back, and full live coverage, the only station that you'll be seeing this happen. Thanks for watching, folks.
Thank you.